and welcome to the Says Who podcast with Kat and Tip.
Hello.
Hello.
And today we're joined by a very special guest. He is an actor, writer, director, producer, composer, creative head of Big Finish Productions, and the voice of the Daleks. Doctor Who legend, Nicholas Briggs.
God, that's a lovely introduction. Who are you and what are you doing in my shed? That's what I
How are you?
I'm good, actually. Well, I mean, the honest answer is I'm recovering from a really horrible cold, but I'm okay.
No.
You know, thank you for the sympathy. That was my aim. But yeah, I'm my general sense of well-being is good. There are peripheral symptoms that you don't want to hear about. Well, we've all had colds, right? But I was out of action last week. I was I was really pathetic. I won't say it's flu because it wasn't flu. It was just a really bad cold, and I couldn't get out of bed for 2 days.
Oh, no.
Bless you.
Anyway,
Well,
since you asked, but
it's not affecting your dulcet tones, so it's... I mean, well, we've got lots to chat about.
okay, let's start.
We're looking at sort of a whistle-stop tour of your career, I guess.
Right.
We'll make some various stops at different stations, but
Well, I would just like to mention now that the reason I wanted to come on this podcast is because you did that lovely one about our new 11th Doctor Adventures, the first question, starring Miles Taylor and Jasmine Bays as the Doctor and Eleanor. It's the full commercial running now. You know? I just thought I wanted to join in, so I certainly would love to talk about that later, but fire away.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely, yeah, I'd love to chat about that.
Absolutely. But to start off, do you want to tell us a little bit about when you first started watching Doctor Who, and what about it was it that captured your imagination?
God, I suppose that's the most obvious question to ask, isn't it? And I'm not sure I have a proper answer for it. Because, of course, when I first started watching Doctor Who, it was a very long time ago. And I think that I probably can't remember it because I was probably like 3 or 4. Right. So I have some very misty memories of the Daleks master plan recently. And when I was confronted by Brian Cant's character, what was the character? I can't remember, but the shot of him dead with his mouth open, you know, that the Australian censor had wanted to cut had they shown it. I remember that image. I thought, oh, I've seen that before. I remember that from my childhood. But I don't have any direct memories of the Daleks master plan other than that strange... And well, just sort of misty images of Daleks moving around. But with Power of the Daleks, which I remember very well, I already knew about the Daleks. So the only way I could have known, and I certainly hadn't seen the movies. I was going to say TV movie. I mean the cinema films of Peter Cushing. So it's by a process of elimination that I certainly remember quite a lot of William Hartnell's final season, but yeah, I was too young. I mean, I was talking clang to David Tennant the other day for a Big Finish interview when he came in to record, and we did a nice sit-down interview. And he was talking about how his first memories of Doctor Who come from when he was about 3, when he saw John Pertwee turn into Tom Baker and started to... he loved that and got from his parents that was to do with acting, and that's when he wanted to be an actor. But the fact that he remembers that from that age is quite remarkable, because you generally don't start... you know, remembering properly for the rest of your life from about 4 or a bit later onwards. So, you know, I take that also from my son. I think we took him to Australia to some Doctor Who conventions. Well, I know we did when he was about 3, and he has absolutely no recollection of it whatsoever. And, you know, he went to a foreign country, flew around, you know, we flew to different cities. We went to New Zealand, and he doesn't remember a single thing of it. I tell him all sorts of stuff about it, about how every time he made a blowing noise, Sylvester McCoy would make his hat fall off, so they became best chums and all that kind of thing. You know, once a kid realizes that Sylvester McCoy will make his hat fall off wherever he is in a room, and you go, you know. But no,
so
not a flicker of memory. But yes, so those are my earliest memories of Doctor Who, and I think that I think that as a kid I was interested in sort of fantastical things that took me away from reality, the mundanity of reality. And so I liked lots of other things around that time. I liked Lost in Space and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and, sort of goofy shows like that. But really Doctor Who won out by virtue of the fact that it just kept going, and in those days was on most of the year. And I think that was the real, it's rather prosaic really, but it's the real power of Doctor Who, that it was just around a lot. And and by the time it stopped being around quite so much, I was already hooked. And there's that thing, isn't there, that happens with Doctor Who fans. I was just auditioning an actor for a part today, and he said he was really into Doctor Who when he was a kid. I said, but you grew up, didn't you? And I said, myself and the other person at the audition, I said, we didn't. We carried on. There's that crucial age where people grow up and go, well, that was great, but now I'm going to do slightly more grown-up things. And for whatever reason, to be discussed on another podcast with lots of psychology experts, we hang on to it, don't we? Because of that thing that got us watching it in the first place, that got us away from whatever bit of reality we wanted to get away from to make ourselves feel better. And that's certainly, that means that Doctor Who feels like home to me when I sit down at this desk and I write a script edit a script, do some sound design, do some music, even have a meeting about budgets. I feel like I'm home. This makes sense to me. I'll go and lie on the couch now. And then and I remember being very hostile to the idea that there was a new Doctor Who. I remember being very upset that William Hartnell was going, because kids don't like change. But immediately got over it, because I think it's fair to say that Patrick Troughton's probably my favourite Doctor. Right. I think he's my favourite Doctor because he was the one who proved it was possible to do that, to be a new Doctor and to take over. And I think that it was, even though I do love the William Hartnell stuff very much, it was in the second Doctor era that the real format of the show was defined, which is this creature from elsewhere goes to other places and fights evil. I think, it's not a hard and fast rule, but mostly William Hartnell's Doctor was trying to get back to the TARDIS and there was something stopping him. He mostly didn't say, no, I've got to put things right here, whereas Patrick Troughton's Doctor did. And I think that happened because writers new to the show came to it and thought, isn't that what it's about? So that's how they wrote it. And there was no great consistency in those days. And people thought, yeah, that's what it's about. And of course, in the Patrick Troughton era, it was mostly about turning up to a base. There was an authority figure he didn't get on with and something trying to get in. And he won the authority figure over grudgingly by defeating the thing. And that's pretty much the format that they repeated over and over again. And in those days, that's what we thought Doctor Who was. Like in the John Pertwee era, for a lot of it, we thought Doctor Who was about alien invasion attempts and a load of soldiers, firing bullets at them that didn't kill them,
I think it's really interesting, though, because you said there about Doctor Who sort of being a form of escapism, which I think it is for a lot of people, that fantastical, it's that sci-fi fantasy worlds, and the whole premise of it being we can go anywhere, anywhen. The limits, there are no limits. But then, conversely, the fact that feels like home to so many people, and it's the wanting to escape into the new and interesting and exciting, but also that feeling so comforting and homely. I think that's a really interesting sort of dichotomy.
It is, isn't it? But I think it's because, as some cynics might say, it depends how close you are to Doctor Who. If you're very close to it, you can see all the differences between all the stories. But the further you get away from anything, and the further you get away from Doctor Who, to the dispassionate viewer, it all looks the same. It's all the same thing. I remember when I was at drama school, the head of the drama school came up to me was also the drama school that Tom Baker went to. But that's not the reason I went.
Yeah.
I think he got chucked out after a year anyway. But and I wasn't. I win.
No.
This mystical head of the drama school, who we didn't really have much to do with, he bumped into me on the stairs. He said, "You're the one who's the Doctor Who fan, aren't you?" And I went, yes. And he said, "I just watched it last Saturday. It's rubbish," he said. He said, "It's just the same thing all the time. It's like, oh, Doctor, come on." That's what he thought Doctor Who was. Oh, right. Doctor, come on. And, do you know, I can almost see in my mind's eye Stephen Moffat nodding to that, you know. Go, yeah, that is essentially what Doctor Who is. And it kind of is, actually. You just have to find all the interesting bits that go between the and the come on and afterwards and before, you know. So it is, on paper, it is this amazing thing that can be anything. But actually what we really like about it is that whatever view we've got of Doctor Who is that it keeps reproducing that for us.
Yeah.
But from a long way away, there's no difference between, you know, something from the Stephen Moffat era and something from Patrick Troughton. You know what I mean? There's no real. There appears to the dispassionate viewer no real narrative difference. Of course there is. We know. We know about that. But you know, looking at it from a dispassionate point of view, it's all the same load of rubbish, as my head of the drama school said to me.
Well, it's that same DNA that it's got at its core, isn't it? But
it's like, for me, all soap operas are the same. They're all about people arguing in pubs or worrying about what the price of milk is, and you know. And of course, that's a huge insult to all the people who work really, really hard, you know, in the writers' rooms of soap operas, working out all the intricate character interactions. Have we done this before? Yes, we have, but will they notice? All that kind of stuff, you know. And of course, it is all different, but to me, it isn't. All reality shows as well, you know. I don't like those either. They're all the same. They're all about, it's sort of a weird gladiatorial sport where we humiliate our fellow citizens and call it entertainment, is what I think of reality television. Slightly controversial point of view. I know, because my wife watches it a lot, so I sort of hear it on her computer while I've got my headphones on watching Death to the Daleks on a loop, you know.
I know which I'd rather be watching.
Exactly.
So you mentioned there about something that David said. David, like I know him.
David Bates,
something that David Tennant said about how Doctor Who kind of was the foundation for him wanting to get into the arts and become an actor. How much of your interest in the arts and, you know, all of the creative things that you do, how much of that do you think the seed of that is in from Doctor Who?
I think a lot of it, but I think my interest in Doctor Who, as well as sort of getting me away from whatever I wanted to get away from, I'm skirting around that, we won't go into that. It made me want to imitate it and do things like it. So my elder brother, my brother's 9 years older than me, so you know, big gap. He had a reel-to-reel tape recorder, which was just an incredible magical thing. And while he wasn't around, I used to ask if I could borrow it, and he very grudgingly would let me. I mean, you know, I was just a young kid. I think he was thinking, don't break it. It's really expensive, you know. But I used to start to do my own sort of little radio plays just with myself. And a lot of it was, if it wasn't actually Doctor Who, it was a bit like Doctor Who. But I used to do Star Trek as well. You know, I used to play all the characters in Star Trek very badly, and make my own sound effects, you know, for Doctor Who stuff. I had a wheelbarrow that made a weird noise, which I thought was a bit like a TARDIS. Unfortunately, it just sounded like a wheelbarrow, but never mind. You know, I didn't have a TARDIS sound effect I could use in those days. I was very delighted when I got the Out of This World LP, it was, which had the TARDIS landing and takeoff on it, and what turns out to be lots of other sound effects from Doctor Who, although they weren't labelled as such. I'm getting into too much detail. But anyway, it's it was definitely that made me want to do stuff like that, and make what wasn't real and what was more exciting than reality come to life in some way. It wasn't enough for me to just sit back and watch it. I wanted to be a part of it in some way. So whether that was writing stuff down, drawing, I used to draw so much. I've recently chucked loads of it out because I wasn't a good artist. I did do an O level, if you know what those were, in art, and passed and got a B, but I was never a good enough artist, as good as I wanted to be. But I used to draw loads of Doctor Who comic strips, and if I wrote a Doctor Who story, I would always illustrate it. You know, it's interesting that Russell is a great illustrator. He's a really talented cartoonist, isn't he? He does amazing drawings. Much more talented at that than I am. But yeah, you can see it's the same instinct, isn't it? All of us who are a bit obsessed with Doctor Who will grab any medium and try and use it to express a story. And, you know, that led to me creating a school review at the school I was at, with all sorts of silly sketches in it, most of which I, in inverted commas, wrote because I think I nicked most of the ideas from stuff I'd seen on the telly. But, you know, so all of it was about wanting to become embroiled in it myself. You know, it wasn't enough to be entertained by it. I wanted to be able to, and that's what led me to tape record Doctor Who, because there was no such thing as domestic video recorders in those days. So I would listen to it, and I'd listen to it on headphones and listen to it over and over again until I felt like I wasn't just listening to it, I was completely surrounded by it, completely immersed by it. And so, you know, this is why I ended up doing what I'm doing, you know, to cut a long story short, because that was just my desire, you know, to be right in the middle of it, really.
And that kind of desire kind of progressed and made you get involved in your fan productions.
Yes.
Can you
audio
tell us
visuals,
a bit about how you got into audio visuals?
How did that happen? That happened because I had a friend who I thought was the only other Doctor Who fan in the world, Nicholas Layton, who I was at school with from about the age of 11 onwards. And I went off to drama school and he stayed down in Southampton, where the sort of area I'm from, and you know, did sensible things like get a job. And but he, while I was at drama school, he got involved with the local Doctor Who Appreciation Society local group, and they were doing sort of audio drama stuff for fun. And he got me involved in it when I came back from drama school. And, you know, because it was all done on a completely amateur basis for love, I thought, I can't do this because I'm meant to be a professional actor now. I just left drama school, got my degree, and not that helps you act. But anyway, got a degree of talent, a tiny degree. But then, the temptation was too much, and I wrote one and was in it, and then, became the Doctor, and also started doing the Dalek voices as well. So I had quite a few battles with myself. That's how I got into it, really, because I think also the guy they had playing the Doctor was a chap no longer with us, Stephen Payne, who was a very prominent member of the Doctor Who Appreciation Society, and they asked him to play the Doctor because they thought he's got curly hair, and which is great on audio, of course. And Stephen was completely bemused by being asked, but thought, I'll give it a go. And he was spectacularly bad in almost every possible way you can imagine. And I think that he probably thought that now. Well, now he's dead, of course I can say that because he can't argue with me. But anyway, so Bill Baggs, who was the sort of mini tyrant who was running it, said I think he thought he was JNT. That was the model for Doctor Who producers in those days. And he sort of thought, I think I'll get this rather desperate unemployed actor called Nicholas Briggs to do it, because he clearly it would make his life to be Doctor Who or the Doctor. And that's how I got into it. And it took up too much of my life. I got really serious about it, and I started learning more about post-production and doing music for the first time, really thanks to a musician and writer called Jim Mortimer, who you might recognise his name from some of the the book, the Doctor Who
the
books.
VNAs and things. Yeah.
And he sort of really he was a very good musician and really creative, and he introduced me to synthesizers and let me borrow some and said, yeah, you can do that, you can. And he really helped me to believe in myself as someone who could make interesting sounds. So all sorts of really important things happened for me during the audio visuals experience. Really, it was like another full education, really, in everything I needed to know in order to do the job I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Really. And as I've said a million times before, I'm so worried about repeating myself, that Gary Russell, who was also involved in it more latterly, although all the way through in some form or another, he said to me, wouldn't it be great if we could do this as a proper job one day? Get the doctors off the television and kind of, get a license from the BBC. And then he, through Jason Hay-Gallery, who, stumped up the cash and also had the business acumen, made that happen and got me involved. I can't take any of the credit for any of the negotiations with the BBC, but I was there right at the beginning of Big Finish, kind of going, can I write it? Can I do all these things? And they didn't have the heart to say no.
So you also worked on various BBV fan films in the 90s, and they cast various Doctor Who cast members, and you also did your Mythmaker series as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So what were those experiences like, meeting and working with people that you'd grown up watching on the telly?
Terrifying, really.
Yeah.
And I was very awkward and difficult. And I find most of the older Mythmakers, really excruciating to watch.
Yeah.
Not least because it's obviously a documentary catalogue of me losing my hair. I remember it's when I did my first one that which was Nicholas Courtney. And I started at the location of, I think we filmed it all at the location of most of it, for Mordrin Undead. And I was sort of looking up the hill to the monument. Now, I knew that I was losing my hair a bit at the front in those days. And I was looking up the hill. And when I saw the shot, I could see there was a little gap at the back of my head there, and I just thought, oh my God, it's going there as well. But because you very rarely see the back of your own head, especially in those days. We didn't carry around camera video devices with us, which we do now with our phones. In those days, it was quite a novelty to be able to see yourself from a different angle, an unflattering angle. So that's one thing about them. And and it was a terribly awkward, difficult interview with Nicholas Courtney, who I have to tell you ended up being a great friend of mine. But he was an awkward, nervous, shy person as well. Right. And we just set each other off. We were just useless. So it was years later, we went back and sort of redid the interview and took the mickey out of ourselves being so awkward with each other, and had lots of jokes at each other's expense. And, so it was often... It's also, may I take you back to a time before possibly you were born, when Doctor Who was not a cool thing. After 2005, Doctor Who became really cool, and I noticed a huge difference in all the people from the TV series who I would work with that suddenly wanted to talk about Doctor Who. But before that, it was a little bit like you were, I don't know, asking them about a girlfriend or a boyfriend they'd really rather forget, because it was all a little bit embarrassing. I remember saying to Maureen O'Brien, who played Vicky with the first Doctor, just explaining for anyone who thinks this is a news podcast. I remember saying to her when she was talking about the difficulty she had with her relationship with Doctor Who and how she was initially very frosty to fans. She famously, when a fan wrote a sort of questionnaire to her and sent it in the post, she answered all the questions really in a perfunctory way and put at the end something along the lines of, "There, I've done it. Now will you leave me alone?" or something. Maybe it wasn't that harsh, but it was a little bit like, I've done what you asked. I'm not a bad person, but please don't keep making me do this. And I said to her about, that experience and experiences after that. This is when she'd done her first big finish playing Vicky, which was a companion chronicle called Frostfire, I think I want to say it's called, by Mark Platt. We went back on the train together, and I said, I'm trying to work out how you feel about Doctor Who. I said, years and years ago in the 90s, early 90s, I did a rep season in a seaside town called Sidmouth in Devon, and it was 13 weeks of, quite ropey theatre that we only had about 3 days to learn each play. And it was really quite sort of intense, but not something I'd hold up as the best thing I'd ever done. And, and if you started asking me about I probably won't remember all the titles of the plays, or indeed even all the cast. Is it a bit like someone coming up to me and being obsessed with that and wanting to know all about it? She said, that is exactly what it's like. It is exactly like that. No, I don't know whether she'd still say that. I can hear her sort of laughing at me telling that tale. That is sometimes what it was like talking to Doctor Who people. So it's a terrible thing to say, but when I interviewed them, it was a little bit like getting blood out of a stone, and they'd agreed to do it in good faith, but they just thought, oh, can we get this over with? And Wendy Padbury, my favourite story about Wendy Padbury is when we turned up to do it, when she was doing a Super Ted show with John Pertwee in a theatre in Wales. They were setting up all the cameras, because in those days there was a lot to set up. Now you just pick something up and go, action, that's it. You don't have to worry about lighting because the digital pictures are so brilliant. This was all lots of lighting and 2 cameras being set up and plugged into big recorders and all this. While this was going on, she said to me, I don't know anything about Doctor Who. I don't remember anything. And they'd actually written a list of questions that they wanted me to stick to, the director had. And she said, what are the answers to these blooming things? So I went through each one, and I said, you want me to tell? She went, yes, tell me what the answers are. And I said, well, this was so-and-so, and, the Wheel in Space. What was that? There was a spaceship with Cybermen. Was that the one in the tunnels? No, that was, So I told her all the answers, and she was really good. She came back with every answer that I'd told her. Yeah. And so, the joke between us for years afterwards at conventions, I would say, I gave Wendy all these answers. It's true, isn't it? She'd go, yeah, more or less. Yeah, it's what you told me is what I'm now telling people. Yeah. Now, I'm sure that's not entirely true, but I think there's a good dollop of truth in it. And also the fact, and also people have, now Doctor Who's become cooler. They've kind of dredged their memories. They've been given permission to remember that stuff.
Yeah.
But I had some really quite awkward times. And a lot of it was to do with me just feeling awkward about myself and not being comfortable in my own skin. But I want to blame them as well. Yeah. I tell you, there was a turning point, which I often tell people about that. The turning point was Colin Baker and Sophie Aldred both gave me the confidence to think I knew what I was doing. Colin did it just by purely doing that, just being, quite gruff, but, I was a bit tentative around him. I say, well, what should we do? And he'd just look at me and say, you're the boss, you're in charge, you tell me. Yeah, brilliant idea, let's do it. He would, and I thought, oh, brilliant idea. Okay, I'll do that then. And he really encouraged me to, build up my confidence. And then Sophie, more or less the same age as me, really lovely person. Also, we did the Mythmakers near where I was living at the time in southeast London, and she's from that area. Yeah. And so there was a real connection between us, because it was just like talking to one of my friends, because she looked and sounded the same as my friends. And she was, if you've ever met her or ever seen her interviewed, she is one of the loveliest, most positive. Yeah. There's such a positive energy coming from Sophie, and it's irresistible and lovely. And so she made me really feel, you can see if you're watching this, I've got taller in the picture. She made me feel I was taller. She made me feel I had something to offer. She gave me credit for what I could do, despite the fact she frightened the life out of me by driving too fast in the car we were in. You know, those narrowing bits that are meant to slow you down? She just drove straight at it at about 50 miles an hour and was so delighted that I screamed, you know.
It's what Ace would do.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and then she threw a grenade over her shoulder. Yeah. Nitro 9, sorry.
No.
But yeah, so I think that really, after that, the Mythmakers helped my confidence, really. Up until then, it's a terrible thing to say, I kind of dreaded doing them because I thought, I'm just going to muck this up, you know. I mean, Ian Marter was lovely as well, actually. But I was still very, very nervous, I think. But, you know, he really did help as well.
To kind of bounce off of that, kind of Sophie and Colin giving you this kind of confidence. I remember listening to an interview that you'd done, and you said something that stayed with me then for weeks after. You were talking about writing, and you were talking about giving yourself permission to write things.
Yes.
And how much that helped you, and that really resonated with me. And I was kind of like, I give myself permission to write that kind of thing.
Yeah, you've got to find that in yourself somehow, or from outside. Someone will give you permission to give yourself permission. I feel.
Yeah.
You know? Sorry, I interrupted.
It was kind of like that experience. I remember I was on the bus to work, and I was reflecting on it, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. So to kind of come off of that, what other advice would you give to fans that are creating their own work?
Well, keep creating. The important thing is to finish what you do.
Yeah.
That's not a reference to Big Finish.
No.
But that's really important, because when you're trying to be a writer, for example, you start a lot of books and a lot of plays, don't you? And I've written a lot of first chapters that never went anywhere.
I have a book full of first drafts, yeah.
There you go. But do you get to the end of the story, though?
Sometimes it depends. Oftentimes I'm writing something and then a better idea happens.
Yes.
But it can't fit within that story, so it has to go to another one. So then you start writing that one, and that one kind of gets... Sometimes I pick it back up, but yeah.
It's difficult, isn't it? It really is difficult. You can't emphasize. I know it's just writing stuff down, but if you're doing it properly, you're giving of yourself, aren't you? Some writers have the amazing ability to be completely detached from their work and able to produce something that feels tangible to other people and involves them, but it doesn't really affect them. I have come across some writers like that, and I'm not being rude about them, because they're very talented, and you know, their key focus is on being surprising and interesting and different. But I can't do that. I can only give of myself. I can only, when someone says to me, well, why does this happen? And I say, well, because these three other things happen, and that's the only outcome, given that those factors happen. And they think, yeah, but I don't like that. I think, I don't care whether you like it or not. That's how it happened.
That's how it works.
People say, I prefer it if the curtains were yellow. And well, very interesting. Thank you very much. We'll move on now. So, I had a review recently where someone said, oh, why does this creature turn into this, and why does this happen? I thought, well, because it's in the script why that happened. But they just didn't like the idea. So it's a bit like me going, why are these people in a pub arguing? I don't like it. Well, don't watch the soap opera then. Because that's what a soap opera largely is, he said unfairly about the entire genre. Yes, I've finished giving of myself there.
Well, to talk a little bit about, I say a little bit, I imagine this is going to be a
hefty chunk.
hefty chunk of the conversation.
Okay, you've got 3 seconds, Nick.
Yeah.
Big Finish.
Yes.
You touched on it a little bit there when you were talking about Gary Russell and Jason Hay Gallery sort of setting it up. Could you give us like a whistle-stop tour of the Big Finish's
origin story?
Yeah. that, not to massively put you on the spot and tow you down the river, but
yeah. I mean, how do you do that? A whistle stop tour. Well, I mean, we'd done audio visuals. Jason had actually been involved a little bit in audio visuals. He came in and played a part very badly, and I'm so judgmental about people's acting. Poor old Stephen Payne and now Jason Haig-Ellery. I'm just everyone withers in my path. And then Gary had the ambition to do it properly, in inverted commas, and Jason and Gary tried to negotiate a deal. The BBC said no because there was the TV movie, and they thought, no, we're going to do everything ourselves. Then the TV movie, for whatever reason, let's not go into that now, didn't take off, didn't become a series, even though it did very, very well in the ratings in the UK and was great and all that kind of thing. So we did Bernie's Summerfield to prove to the BBC that we could do it, and then they thought, oh yeah, you can do it, and actually we're not doing anything with Doctor Who audio anymore, so let's give them the license. I mean, a lot of it came from a lovely man, a really lovely man called Steve Cole, who's a very talented, very successful young adult author, and well-deserved success. And he was very keen on us, and was friends with Gary particularly, I think. I didn't really know him that well, and still don't, but I know that he's a lovely human being. He really helped Big Finish. And so did Jacqueline Rayner, being our executive producer for the BBC. She was working for BBC Books, and they were a great help to us. They smoothed the way for us. And then, so that we just went from strength to strength. Jason was very cautious about it, but realised that it was selling well enough to go monthly. And who knows, now we sort of release 6 to 8 things a month. It's ridiculous. Gotta slow down. And that went on for what seemed like forever. I actually got to a point with Big Finish where I thought we'd done everything, which is why I went and wrote Creatures of Beauty, where I deliberately did everything in the wrong order for no reason whatsoever, just to explore the parameters of a Doctor Who story. I thought, what would it be like if I begin with the ending, where the Doctor sold everything? Because I thought, we all know that anyway. It's no surprise. And then showed that a story could be interesting if you sort of went through it in a completely random order. Because I thought, that's it. We've exhausted the format, I thought. Ridiculous, isn't it? Here I am, just about to reach my 20th anniversary. I keep saying I mustn't tell people that as executive producer. And I feel now like there are no limits. You can just do anything.
Yeah.
And it's such a glorious feeling. So yes, so at that point, pretty soon afterwards, the TV series was announced as coming back, and all our customers went away because they went, there's a TV series, and almost overnight, that was it. And I think Jason was very close to saying, I think we're done here now. And Gary decided, in this sentence there's a massive universe of stuff, decided not to do it anymore, and I offered my services to do it because my father had just died, and I when someone close to you like that, especially a parent, dies, quite often it seems to me people look for who they are. And I thought, who am I? Am I the person who just does stuff for other people, or have I got something to offer where I can guide the whole thing? And I got a few plans together, and I remember John Ainsworth, who's now the senior producer and has been, we've been friends for about 40 years. He really good close friends. I speak to him most days. I had a long conversation with him this morning. He said, I think you have got something to offer, Nick, and that made a huge difference to me. And so I put my ideas forward, and Jason sort of adapted them a bit, and off we went. And then, I've been very lucky finding great people to work with who are full of ideas. And I've had a few ideas of my own along the way, but mostly what I feel I've done is listened to wise, good, talented people and really enjoyed helping them make their ideas come to life. What I used to say right at the beginning, my chief aim is to make the crazy stuff in my head come to life. But actually, I've discovered that helping other people to do that with their stuff is very nearly as rewarding. There's nothing quite for me. My ideal for Big Finish is to write and direct, do the sound design and the music. The most I do these days is write and direct and do the music. The sound design is a very long, involved, intricate process, even though I absolutely adore doing it. Just, it's not practical for me to spend that much time on a project. And so that's what I've been doing ever since. And that's it, really. Still going.
Still going strong.
Yeah, really. And by virtue, I think, people come and go and I'm still here.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like that with, when I saw David Tennant not very long ago, and, and I'm sitting there chatting to him and I can see his career has just sort of gone through the roof and he's just done millions of things and he's such a talented actor and such a lovely human being that if you can be genuinely lovely and genuinely brilliant, then the sky's the limit, as long as you get the right opportunities, of course. And and we're chatting and, just by my conversation, it's like, oh, Nick, you're still, I'm still, occasionally going to Cardiff and screaming exterminate into a microphone. You know what I mean? I'm still doing the same job, but I'm not very ambitious in terms of career achievement. I'm only ambitious in terms of trying to be happy. It's quite difficult for me because of the way my head is put together, but that's what I'm always aiming for. I'm always aiming to be happy. I'm always aiming to have jokes with Rob Shearman that we won't explain to the listeners and viewers.
No.
Let's have them beforehand, folks. There's a lot of laughter around me. Some of it's a little bit grimace laughter, but I like laughter. I like to make people laugh. I like to be involved in things that make me joyous,
Yeah.
It's all sounding a bit desperate, isn't it? But
not at all.
That's me.
I think that's a lovely ambition to have, though. Just happiness and fulfillment. I think
there's nothing noble about it. It's survival. I can't bear it when things aren't like that. Yeah.
Ultimately, that's what greater thing is there to aspire to than just be happy and fulfilled and content and in whatever form that takes.
Yes, I think that a criticism that people I love sometimes level at me is that I take it all too personally, and I do, because it means everything to me. So I think I am sometimes a bit too thin-skinned and react to, just before we started, I was moaning about some terrible review I'd had. Really, and I remember mentioning something similar to that to Russell T Davies. This is trying to justify my nonsense by bringing in a famous person. And he just laughed at me. He said, because I quoted some bad review. And he said, I love the fact that you remember it, Nick. He said, I don't read any of it. And I said, yeah, well, I barely read it. I said, but unfortunately, when I do, it doesn't matter how many nice things that certain people, one of them present, says about what you've done. There only has to be one negative comment, and the negativity in your brain sort of seizes hold of that.
Holds on to that.
But then, then you can laugh about it as well. I mean, have I ever told this story publicly? I remember I was at Mark Gatiss's clang, like 50th birthday party, I think. And there were loads of famous people there. And I was the only person who hadn't taken my partner. My wife was at home looking after our son, and she didn't want to come to a party anyway. So I'd gone to London this thing. So I felt everyone had a partner, and I felt like complete Billy No Mates, even though everyone's going, oh, hi, Nick, hi. I had no one to sort of stand with and sort of have a little friendly chat with, And so I started migrating towards the door. And just as I was going outside, a lot of people were going outside. It was a very cold night, but there were seats outside. And Stephen Moffat and his wife, Sue Virtue, were heading out. And Stephen, who I didn't know as well then as I know now, said to me, although I was aware of him and we certainly would speak from time to time, he said, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going home. And he said, no, you're not. you're coming and sitting with us, because it was quite early. And he sat down and we ended up having this conversation about who Doctor Who fans hated the most, with both of us saying, no, they hate me. And he's going, no, they really hate me. And, we were exchanging notes about, how we'd been horribly hurt by the ghastly things that people say about us. But it became, I think I accepted they hated him more by virtue of the fact that he was running a television show that's watched by millions of people, and I was running an audio production company that's just listened to by a few thousand people. So it's a big difference. Yeah, you're bound to be hated by more people than that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, speaking of the early days of Big Finish, the first licensed Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama was written by yourself.
Yes.
With the Sirens of Time. What are your memories of writing that, and that being the first one, and sort of being the... I know obviously you'd done the Benny stuff as the adaptation of the Virgin stories as almost like a proof of concept. Yeah. But I guess this is your first time to be given the toys in the Doctor Who sandbox to play with.
Yeah, written stuff for BBV and what have you, where we were sort of doing a kind of non-licensed illegal version of Doctor Who. But actually being able to officially write TARDIS and Doctor and Gallifrey. I mean, that's why I think, the first scene in the original release, not in the re-release version, which is in a different order, narratively, the first scene has got Gallifrey, the alarm going off like from Deadly Assassin, a TARDIS arriving, people talking about Time Lords and the Doctor. I think the word that takes us into the theme tune at the beginning is Doctor, and then da-da-da-dum, off we go. It was amazing, actually. It kind of, I know it sounds a little bit overdramatic, but it kind of felt that this was what I'd waited my whole life to do.
Yeah.
So it was amazing, and I'm very grateful to Gary Russell for being weak enough to allow me to do it, because I think I put him under a lot of... I think he could see when I was suggesting I wrote it, I think probably my bottom lip was trembling, and he did say no, because he said, no, it must be... He told me, he doesn't remember any of this, by the way. He says, that's not how I remember it. So one of us has got it wrong, and I have no idea which it was. Obviously, I think it's not me, but you never know. He told me that the BBC had said only people who have written Doctor Who books can write the audio dramas. And he said, and you haven't written a Doctor Who book. Now, that to me sounds like a clever line to just fob me off. And it stopped me in my tracks. And he left my flat. I've told this story many times in different ways. I'm trying to make it different this time. One of us was wearing a hat. That's not true. He left my flat, which is 5 minutes walk from his flat. And said, that's it. He said, but you can absolutely direct it and do the sound design and music if you want to. And yeah, absolutely. I want you to do all that. I want you to direct them all, he said. And I said, do you want to direct? And he went, no, I'm not doing that. I want to deal with actors. Oh, weird, And so, by the time he got back to his flat, I think he phoned me, and he was phoning me to tell me that he'd spoken to Jason, or maybe just had a conversation with himself, I don't know, where he thought it's probably best to get Nick to write it, because if we get anyone else to write it, it'll leak, and we want to keep this secret.
Okay.
We don't want to involve any more people.
Yeah.
And so he was saying this to me on the phone. I said, well, I've already thought of the story. And he said, yeah, I knew you would have done.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that I told you couldn't write it. So I'd come up with the essential idea for Sirens of Time. I mean, quite a few differences, but essentially the same thing, because I said we should do a multi-Doctor story. My initial idea was, I said we should do the Daleks straight away. And he said, we don't have a license for the Daleks. So I thought, okay, well, if it's not the Daleks, it has to be a multi-Doctor with every Doctor we can get.
Yeah.
And we could only get those three. And so that's why we did it. But it fitted quite nicely, didn't it? You had an episode per Doctor, and then they all got together at the end.
Yeah.
Again, it's a bit different in the re-release of Sirens of Time. That I don't know whether you've heard that, but
I've not heard the Redux. No.
Oh yeah. Well, I recommend that you do. How dare I pronounce an opinion on my own work? But I think it's better.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be our next podcast episode where we
There
compare
we go,
the two.
yeah.
Then,
Well, first up, Nick was wrong about that.
yeah.
I did a new music score and augmented the sound design as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely give that a listen.
Yeah. I mean, as you were saying, having it be a multi-Doctor story and having Peter, Colin and Sylvester, I think it works as almost a little bit of a tasting palette for what the main range would go on to be with those three, and then obviously a little bit later down the line you've got Paul McGann joining. So I think it's a nice sort of introduction to where you went.
Yeah.
To use that hackneyed phrase, it seemed like a no-brainer to me.
Yeah.
I think I was quite forthright at suggesting it. If I'm really certain about things, I have a way of suggesting them like they've already happened. You know what I mean? It's a sort of sneaky technique of getting people to agree with you. Instinctive, I think, actually, and completely unfair. And I was like, oh, well, that's it, you know. But luckily they did agree with me. I don't remember either Jason or Gary having any or expressing any doubts to me about us doing it like that, you know. So that was, I mean, I honestly don't remember that. So who can tell what the truth is, you know? You should interview them. They go, no, we tried to stop him. He wouldn't take any notice. He just kept writing multi-Doctor storylines.
Well, something that I really love about the early main range stuff is that I think for a lot of people, if you were given the Doctor Who license to create original stories, I think 9 out of 10 would throw all of the references and okay, well, this story's got Ice Warriors and this one's got the Zygons and this one's got the Pteroleptals, and just like kind of not it's kind of coast off the back of that IP, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think from those early stories, just introducing, you know, you've got these familiar characters and with the Doctors and companions, but with some of them it's stories that you maybe didn't get as much of that TARDIS team with. So like Peter Davison and Turlough and things like that. Then you're introducing new companions like Evelyn with Colin Baker, who I adore. Just Maggie Stables as Evelyn, amazing.
Yeah, lovely Maggie. Yeah, she was a good friend, a very good friend. Yeah. She was, as I always say, she was my fault. I introduced her to Big Finish because I'd worked with her a lot in the theatre. And we tended to just, in those days, just cast people we knew. We were a bit frightened of phoning up agents and getting, you know, other actors. It's just, it was all contacts. It was all done through, you know, word of mouth, as it were. Well, everything you're talking about there, about the initial approach to all those stories, that is all down to Gary Russell's wisdom. This is very much his idea. There was a slight practical restriction because I think, as you may be aware, that all those different Doctor Who monsters are all part owned or owned by other people, and it was like more negotiation, more money having to be paid out, and I think possibly Jason might have been resistant to that and say, well, let's just get on with, you know, what we've got. But also I think Gary very much wanted to do new things. He didn't, you know, he wanted to save all those familiar things for very special occasions, which he did very successfully when he did that sequence of Dalek stories, you know, one of which I wrote, The Mutant Phase, under the Dalek Empire banner, you know. But I think he was, he wanted to do interesting new stuff, which I think was a brilliant instinct. And you're absolutely right. I think a lesser creative mind would not have perhaps done that, and you know, and so that sort of saved it from being. I mean, it's funny. The Doctor Who fans are always funny about things being a bit fannish. You think, well, you're a bit fannish, aren't you? You're a Doctor Who fan. No, I don't want it to be like me. It's a kind of innate self-loathing we all have. But I think Gary really successfully trod that delicate line between doing the expected and the unexpected. And, you know, and I learned so much from what he was doing. I took note, you know, and so my plan was never to somehow turn back on what Gary had done and do something differently. I don't think there's an obvious difference between his time doing it and my time doing it.
No.
I mean, obviously mine are better.
Cool.
I remember him being slightly offended about the notion that I thought I might do it better. But then someone who will remain nameless said to him, well, it would be really funny if Nick thought, I want to take over, and I tell you what, I might do it a bit worse than it was before. You always want to do it better, don't you? It reminds me, I did a BBC Radio 4 situation comedy or sci-fi comedy series called Nebulous, written by a brilliant writer called Graham Duff. And when we were doing the second series, one of the producers from Baby Cow, Clang Clang Clang, said, he said, Graham, the scripts are a bit better this time, aren't they? You've upped your game. And Graham, ever the sardonic fellow, said, yes. He said it was a difficult call. I thought, shall I make them worse than before? The same as before, or shall I make them better than before? It was a really difficult call. So I went, and the producer was just like, yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But it's a good point, isn't it? You know, that's what you aim to do. No one ever says, look, there's a new season of Doctor Who, and this time it's going to be far less good than the last one. I mean, you always want to make it better. That's how you set out. Even like the worst films in history. You know, like Michael Caine's spoken about that, hasn't it? When he did films like The Swarm, and people say, oh, The Swarm was a real stinker. And he said, we didn't know.
Yeah.
You know, we set out to make a great film, and then everyone decided it was rubbish, and we have to put up with that. So, you know.
Yeah.
So, yes, Gary was placated when he said, it's nothing personal against you, Gary. I mean, obviously he wants to do better. I don't want to keep reading reviews saying it's bring back Gary Russell. Exactly. And I don't think there were any reviews like that. So few.
Yeah.
Maybe after this podcast, people will be writing into you and say, yeah, bring back Gary Russell. Can you reissue that podcast and put Gary's face on this podcast?
We'll re-record if you could just put a mask on, Nick. Yeah.
A green mask.
Oh, dear me. I'm coughing myself pink. Right.
No.
So as well as the main range, you kind of delved out a little bit to explore under the Worlds of Doctor Who banner, which became a sort of umbrella term for exploring that universe, but not necessarily within the traditional Doctor Who format, or even with the Doctor. And so things like Dalek Empire, as you mentioned,
The Cyberman collection,
the Cyberman series, I Davros. What's it like to write Doctor Who without Doctor Who?
Well, when I did it for Dalek Empire, I felt it was, again, so ridiculous. I thought, we've done all we can with the Doctor Who thing. Yeah, I wanted to break free of it, but use some of the trappings of it. And I thought it made it more dangerous, actually, because in Doctor Who there are, several givens, aren't there? The Doctor arrives, the Doctor's clever, the Doctor wins. Which is great. I love that. But it's quite fun when the Doctor isn't there and you suddenly think, oh, those Daleks, like this person who I've now invested in, those Daleks might kill that person. It just makes it more dangerous. I think it brings a different flavour to it, really. Yeah. And I really enjoyed that. Fun and games. I mean, it started off with me just wanting to do something like the old Dalek book, the Blue Dalek Annual from 1964. But then I quickly realised that I wanted to sort of riff on that and do something a bit different. But it was a joyous experience. And, as I've said many times, at some point during the making of Dalek Empire, Jason Hay-Gailey said, the sales for this are quite good. Can you stop killing characters, please? Yeah. Some of them, we might want them to come back. You know? So he got quite nervous about that. Okay, I'll keep some people alive then. Yeah. It was exciting. That's the thing. It was. I was always looking for a new challenge. And I suppose looking back at it, I'm just thinking about it now for the first time in this way. I suppose I did want to have something that I could call my own. And Dalek Empire was my own. And Gary was very good at leaving it to me. I don't think I wanted his help. And he did say, I remember him being quite dismissive of the characters in it. He said, "You've got to watch this," he said, "because all these characters are stupid and unlovable, and no one's going to want to come on that story with you," because he couldn't understand the thing where Suze and Albie fall in love the first time they see each other. And he said, "That's ridiculous. No one's going to believe that." But I think we did, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, also, if that's not on on the table, then there's a whole genre of rom-coms and things
And
that
I've realised this. I've been denying it, but I quite like rom-coms.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes if I'm really bored, I just go on Netflix and some awful rubbish. Yeah. And I'm halfway through it and I think, God, I'm really liking this. Oh God, what's the first date going to be like? I just get a bit. And I've famously been knocked for liking that film Chalet Girl. You know Chalet Girl? You ever seen it?
No.
I love the fact that you've never seen it. It's it's a load of old cobblers. And I can't even really describe the plot. And I can't remember the name of the actress. She was the one in Rogue One. She got famous in, you know? What's her name?
Felicity Jones.
Felicity Jones is the star of Chalet Girl. Yeah. And it's all about, you know, a young girl working as an au pair and, you know, and the posh boy who's too good for her but loves her. And, you know, right. I'm filling up just talking about it. It's just such nonsense, but I do quite like it. So, yeah. So I suppose that's how that got in Dalek Empire. But I'm fascinated by those extraordinary moments in life where you meet someone and you have a connection and it feels almost supernatural. I'm not into the supernatural. I annoy a lot of people I know by only believing in science. You know, Camille Cajuri said to me once that it's another clang there. I just mentioned famous people to make myself more interesting.
We're going to have like a clang counter.
Yeah, do, please.
In the bottom right.
It'll serve me right. She said to me, she'd gleaned what she thought was my star sign.
Right.
And I said something. She said, "Oh, yes, typical Virgo." I said, "Really? Typical Virgo?" She said, "Oh, yeah, through and through, blah, 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 lots of justification." I said, "Yeah, well, I'm a Libra, so how does that?" She went, "Oh, shut up." And I said, "You do know it's all rubbish, don't you?" I said, the relative positions of stars that are billions of miles away from each other just look a certain shape in our sky. I said, they've got nothing to do with each other or us. So how could they have... She said, "It governs everything." And I said, "But it doesn't, though." And she said, "Well, what do you think makes sense of the world?" I said, "Science." And this is I've said this to her often and it makes her laugh. She went, "Science? Oh, pah." Anyway, I love Camille, but yeah, she and I have completely different universal views of things. Yeah. And she's always like, "Well, you're the one who's losing out."
Yeah.
But so I'm quite dull about those sort of things, but I do love the idea of weird, spiritual, emotional, unaccountable things happening. I believe there are boring explanations for them somewhere, like chemicals and what have you, but it still feels remarkable and magical. You know, like I've got a son, and when he was born, Sylvester McCoy, clang, had said to me, he said, "When your son is born, you will feel the most intense feeling of love you have ever felt in your entire life." And I thought, yeah, all right, old chap, fine. Yes. Oh, lovely, Sylvester. And then it happened. It was like a bad 1970s special effect. It kind of happened, and you just go, it's just, but of course, all that is, evolutionary programming. You know, that's what that is. It doesn't take away from the fact that it is the most incredible feeling, but it is, it's not something that's just a blobby thing that's descended upon you in a terrible, sparkly CSO thing. It is just programming. It's the fact that we, nature and our genes want us to keep reproducing ourselves so that we can choke the planet and all die horribly. Anyway, sorry, that went very dark there, but yeah.
True.
No, yeah, it's an excellent point. It doesn't, the science doesn't negate the
wonder,
the magic. Yeah, the wonder.
I mean,
yeah,
and there's that thing that Arthur C. Clarke says. I mean, it's just not quite the same thing, but said that advanced technology viewed by the less advanced looks like magic, and that's why all these incredible things that happen to us in the wonderful parts of our lives, they feel like magic. And I'm quite interested in people, in writing about people experiencing those things, and that's sort of what happens in Dalek Empire.
Some of my favourite big finishes is the Dalek Empire and Cyberman collection, purely because they sound great. But I really, obviously they sound great, but I really like the fact that we don't have the Doctor, and it gives us the opportunity, and I think Big Finish is the great platform to do that, to explore the Doctor Who universe without the Doctor. And also we get some really lovely Dalek and Cyberman voice work.
Hey.
Obviously. So going from voicing the Daleks and Cybermen on Big Finish and then being asked to do the main show, how did that come about?
Well, I think it's Russell T Davies, really. I mean, because was very much in the he wasn't going to conventions and what have you, but very much a Doctor Who fan, and he was listening to Big Finish and reading Doctor Who magazine. So he'd heard me doing a Dalek voice, and then he'd read the very sad article I wrote all about how to do a Dalek voice and how the different Dalek voices in different stories are different. There was a picture of my ring modulator, and he just thought, well, this guy can do it, and he's got the gizmo. And there's no such thing as the radiophonic workshop anymore. So they can't just in Cardiff say, "Oh, get the radiophonic workshop to do the Dalek effect," because everyone's like, "What? Well, there's a cupboard here with some wires in, but that's it." So they got me to do it because I was a total solution. I think. I mean, I didn't have to audition. I was just asked to do it and turn up and do it. And just talking about it now, that makes me realise, because you can't get an acting job without auditioning.
Yeah.
But I did. I mean, if I'd had to audition, I wouldn't have got it, because I'm terrible at auditions. I get so scared, and everything that I can normally do well, I'm unable to do, like remember lines, or I've done loads of theatre. I can memorise, hours of dialogue. I'm not saying it's easy, but you ask me to go and do that for an audition, and I'm like, and casting directors just look at me kind of like, oh my God, he's just rubbish, isn't he? So yeah, I've largely given up doing all that and auditions and stuff, because I'd love to do what Peter Davison was talking to me, Clang, about it the other day. I did a big sit-down interview with him for Big Finish, and he said that there was a part that redefined his career. And he said that he doesn't feel that he's very good at auditions as well. And he said he'd reached a level in his career. It was when he played a headmaster in a series that starred Lenny Henry. And he played the headmaster who Lenny Henry replaced. I think it was called something like The Head or something like that. And Peter played this man in crisis who was not a very sympathetic character, and the whole school hated him. And there were some tragic moments where his life just fell apart. And Peter could see this. And Peter had never really played parts like that before. And this is when he redefined himself. And they wanted him to play the part. And he went. And they said, you don't have to audition for it. You can just meet the producers and it'll all be fine. But he said to me, I knew they'd want to. He said, they always do want you to read it, do the audition. And he said he got there and they went, oh, that's all great. And, they said, anyway, since you're here, why don't you just, we could just do a scene. And Peter said he really sort of, took a risk and felt he was taking a risk. And he said, do you know what? No, I don't want to read it, actually, because you want me to do it and I'll probably just mess it up. You won't want me to do it after you've heard me audition. Yeah. So if you want me to do it, I'll do it, and it will be great, and it'll be fine. And they can't. And he said he thought he'd really blown it, and then he said, "I got the part," And I thought that was a lovely thing, and I've always thought I wished I'd reached the level in my career or have the guts to do that. Say, look, if you'd like me to do it, then I'll come along and be brilliant. I'll be rubbish at the audition, and you won't want to employ me, but I will absolutely do this for you. And you imagine they just go, no. I had an experience like that, which I don't think I've ever spoken publicly about, that when David Tennant was already the Doctor but wasn't telling anyone, and I already knew David, and we were chatting a lot on text while I was doing the Christopher Eccleston series and he was doing Casanova for Russell, and we both talked a lot about what Russell had said about each of us to each other, and then we all nice things, obviously. And then we met up for a meal for lunch in a rather nice club in London, and we were chatting away, and we were meant to be just there for lunch, and we spent like the whole afternoon together talking away. And at one point, a casting director came up to David and said, "Really sorry to nab you here, David, but we'd really like you to come and audition, come and read for a part in, we're doing a new live version of Quatermass on BBC television." And David, being the wonderful, generous, lovely human being he is, he said, "What about my mate Nick here?" And she was like, "What?" And he said, "Nick's an actor. He's a brilliant actor. He does fantastic voices and things. Surely he's the voice of the Daleks in Doctor Who, and and surely there's a part for Nick in Quatermass. You'd love to be in Quatermass, wouldn't you?" And I went, "Oh God, yeah." And she was like, "Oh yeah. We'll definitely get in touch with you." And I said, "Do you want to know who my agent is?" Oh yeah. So I gave the details, and I was invited. I think David made a thing of it when he went for his reading. "You see my mate Nick?" And I got contacted, and I went along, and it was horrific. They were doing it because David Tennant had told them to, and they just sat there and they went, "Hi, right, who do you want to play?" I went, "I don't know, Quatermass," and they just went, "Yeah." So any other thoughts? I said, "Well, anything you like." And I kept looking at the script in front of me. I'd read the script, and I said, and looking at a camera they had set up, and they said, good. Well, anyway, nice to meet you. Bye. And they just sent me out of the room without me doing an audition.
Wow.
So you felt they were just going, yeah, fine. Yeah, right, we've seen him, all right? Stop bothering us.
Yeah.
Right. Next.
It was absolutely horrific. So that was an audition I definitely didn't get because I wasn't even given the chance to audition.
No.
Wow.
Luckily, I don't remember the names of any of the people there. Because otherwise I would have named and shamed
Yeah, I was going to say name drop them.
Presumably it was the director. I don't know who the director was of that piece, but I mean, I felt I'd never been looked at by people, with such hatred and dismissal. It was just I think I might have laughed because it was so horrible. I just thought I can't believe that people could be, this, I don't know, impolite, really.
Yeah.
It was just, but they obviously thought that I was a raving lunatic. They'd never heard of me, and they asked me who I wanted to play. I thought, well, I'll play Quatermass then.
If you're
No.
asking.
That's not for the likes of you, young man, they thought. And of course they were right, but they could have been a bit nicer about it, I feel.
I mean, when Big Finish was formed, it was obviously in the wilderness years.
Yes.
And you guys were very much like a core part of sort of keeping the flame of the fandom, if you like, or the legacy of the show alive. So when the show came back to TV, did you find yourselves sort of changing your approach with how you were telling your stories? Did you sort of restructure and try and Did you shake
yes,
things
there
up
were definite changes. I think I made. I mean, we were just doing the first Lucy Miller and Eighth Doctor things, and Alan Barnes, the script editor, and I very much wanted to give it the vibe of the new series. I mean, it's difficult to imagine now how new and incredible the new series of Doctor Who felt. It was like Doctor Who had never been quite like that before, just in terms of its style and the feel of it and the energy and the speed of it. And we definitely wanted to make our new Eighth Doctor stories like that. But I wanted to get some of the sensibility of that into our regular monthly releases. And Alan Barnes, I think, said this first, but I wholeheartedly agreed. So that doesn't make it my idea. But we wanted to make every single release special in some way. We weren't able to do that initially because I inherited a lot of scripts that I didn't think were good enough. And some of them we just quietly got rid of. Some of them were a bit noisier in the way we got rid of them, unfortunately. And others we changed a lot, and we sort of and tried to get new stuff in. And Alan was saying we've got to get that. People always have to say, "Oh, that's the one where," about each story, to be able to say something. And I think that Big Finish, with no competition around, had fallen into a state where it was just doing another story. And actually, they're all great in their own way, but they're not. We wanted to make every story a standout, every story a reason for people to start buying and make a big fuss about whatever the unique thing was about it. And because Alan and I kept on plugging at that, and because at some point the TV series wasn't on air anymore between series, there was a huge difference. Jason, if you speak to him, will tell you about this, about the TV series is on, sales figures went, the TV series finished, the sales figures come back up again because people go, I need more Doctor Who. Well, that Big Finish thing I used to do when I was a fool, and they so a combination of those two things, we gradually built back up our audience and kept finding new things to do. And when David Richardson came on as the then line producer, later his title changed to senior producer, but it was essentially the same job, just sounded more important. That's the important thing. Like executive producer, that sounds very important. What does it mean? Who knows? He started, because we said, well, we need to do more interesting stuff. He just started coming up with ideas for all sorts of things. And likewise, Jason as well. Jason's always throwing in interesting ideas. It was his idea to do the Lucy Miller stuff. I mean, Alan created the creative element of it, but to do a different strand with Paul McGann, with a different companion, something that we could put on Radio 7 as well. It was, we were just trying to do different things. I remember Jason suggested the Jago and Lightfoot thing that was massively popular. That's how we fought back, really, and it worked. It's never. I mean, I don't know quite how to say this without it being massively controversial and end up in Radio Times. But I've noticed on the rare occasions where I dare to peep at the kind of things people say on YouTube, that there's this weird and completely unrealistic narrative that Big Finish is somehow like, where I'm sitting in my yacht in the Bahamas doing this podcast with you because we're just making masses of money because we charge so much for everything, and it is difficult when the only money you get is just from what people pay for the productions. They're really expensive to pay, and I don't want to undermine the business, but there's not gold in their nahils. It's a real struggle to make this work, and no one is getting rich from it. In any outrageous way. I'm certainly not rich from it. I'm fine. I'm happy. I've got a nice job. That's good. But it's not. So we're always in some form or another, to some degree or another, fighting for our survival. That Big Finish, always. And so we're always concentrating very hard on what sells well. Should we do something more like that? Should we do something new? Are people tired of that? The constant, very regular creative meetings I have with now John Ainsworth and Jason Haig-Ellery and Lizzie Worstel as well. We're always talking endlessly about this stuff and trying to work out how best we can get you all excited, and get ourselves excited about it, and hopefully that excitement transmits as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump forward a little bit
to
the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, to which we had the light at the end from Big Finish. And I was re-listening to it the other day, because again, it's one of my favourites. And I was
Thank
listening
you.
to the you're welcome. And I was listening to the behind the scenes interviews as well. I was interested when you said that it wasn't the original story. That wasn't how, or it wasn't the plans that you had thought about initially, which I found was quite amusing, as it was kind of the same with the Day of the Doctor.
Yes, they did turn out to be rather different, didn't it? Yeah.
Good, yeah.
They invented a doctor we'd never heard of, which was such a masterstroke, wasn't it?
Yeah. And there was a little clip where you said maybe one day the original story or what was in the works beforehand might get released, and I was curious if that happened.
Oh, I don't know. While you were asking that question, I was thinking, what was my original idea? I can't remember. I think it was an idea that Alan Barnes and I spoke about, and it was just meant to be. No, I can't remember exactly what it was. But it wasn't a multi-Doctor story. We wanted to do something that was just so intrinsically Doctor Who, so Doctor Who-y. It was unbelievable. I'm starting to sound like a certain American president, aren't I? It was, a little bit like it was. This is not a good analogy, but it was. We wanted it to be like if Doctor Who was squash or cordial. It wanted to be like a drink of Doctor Who that had more cordial in it than you normally would have. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was like so incredibly Doctor Who. You think, oh, this is a bit naughty, but it's lovely, isn't it? It's so sweet.
Yeah.
And that was the feel behind it. But it just became more and more obvious that everyone was expecting a multi-Doctor story. And you just think, oh, not another multi-Doctor story. But we love them, actually, don't we? We sort of love them and hate them because you go, a multi-Doctor story. Oh, it was a bit like a multi-Doctor story, wasn't it? And, oh,
Right.
did so-and-so have enough to do in it? And wouldn't they, you know? So, and I had it in my head that whatever we did, I should probably write it. And David Richardson was pushing very hard for the multi-Doctor thing because Tom Baker had said to him, why don't we get all the boys together? That's what he said. And David was thinking, well, you're the last person I think would say that.
Yeah.
Quick, before he changes his mind.
Yeah. So, and I think John Dornian, he came up with a sort of vague outline or just a notion. I can't remember. If they're watching this podcast, they're thinking, yes, you do remember, Nick. We told you. But I don't remember. But I remember saying, okay, I'll take that and I'll do something with it. I think it was something to do with like a sun exploding or something. And I thought, well, let's make it the TARDIS exploding. And I thought I wanted to find a phrase that sounded familiar, but change it a bit. And it's that phrase, the light at the end of the tunnel, isn't it? That everyone uses. But I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if, like, the thing that's going to happen at the very end of this story, the last thing to happen will be the light on the TARDIS going out, you know? And that's where the idea came from. And then as I was writing it, David Richardson would say, I've just spoken to X, Y, and Z companion. They'll do it as well. And so I kept having to write people in, and then I think David suggested maybe there's a scene where they go somewhere and they can see through the different levels of time, and I'm like, yeah, okay, keep speaking as I'm typing. Yeah, I'll do that. I'm doing that. Right, okay, you know. But it seemed to go down very well, and I remember having some amusing conversations with Stephen Moffat about it because he knew I was writing one, and of course he was writing one as well. And I remember us being on the set of Doctor Who and him saying, how's yours going? I said, yeah, it's all right. I said, I'm a bit, you know, he said, are you sick of it? Yeah, I'm sick of mine. Because you do sometimes get, when you want to get, I'm not suggesting that he didn't like what he wrote. I'm sure he did because it is brilliant. But I think you do get to a point where you're really working hard to get something right. And you think, okay, here we go, through it again. Yeah, it's fine. It'll be great, you know, and you can't see the wood for the trees, really. I can't remember who the script editor was. I wonder who it was. Was it Alan Barnes? I don't remember having a particularly hard time from anyone. And I think it generally went down really well, didn't it? I think Doctor Who magazine atypically at the time, said it was pure gold or something.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I issued some kind of threat beforehand to make it.
Slipped him a fiver before it went to print.
Can you imagine? Oh.
Yeah.
So, but yes, I know you wanted me to tell you what the original story was. I honestly don't remember.
No, it's okay. I was just listening. I was like, that's really curious. So I instantly got my notebook out and wrote that down. I was like, make sure you ask that.
Yes, I mean, does the phrase, I just want to write something into the internet to see if anything... what's nothing at the end of the lane? The magazine of Doctor Who Research and Restoration, it says here. Is it? Yeah.
Oh, yes. Is it like a fanzine thing?
I remember Alan using that phrase to illustrate something he meant, but I don't know why. I don't know the significance of that phrase in Doctor Who lore. Oh, it's an unproduced story. Oh, C. Webber. Oh, I see. It featured early concepts of characters that became Susan for Webber proposed its first. I just remember Alan saying, something like that. But I don't really know. I don't have any memory now of what that is. But we know about C.E. Bunny Webber, don't we? And the creation myth of Doctor Who. That's of no help, is it? Sorry.
No.
I've just tantalised you with a bit more vague rubbish. Yes. Yeah, sometimes I do that talking thing, don't I?
Where you say things.
I say things and then, maybe I was just trying to please everyone a bit too much. And then you all that time you've been wanting an answer to this question. And now I go, I don't really remember.
That's fine. I'll let you
Okay, well, yeah. I tell you, there's been some editing here. The air was blue. She was so cross.
Honestly, yeah.
She said, "You come on this podcast
Yeah.
and you just don't deliver."
Just needed this answer. We'll get Wendy Padbury to give you the answers next time.
Yeah,
Before we
absolutely.
record, yeah.
I'm sure she's got it all written down.
Yeah.
You should absolutely interview her. She's one of the loveliest people.
So one of the other ranges that you kind of introduced, again, kind of springboarding off Day of the Doctor, was the War Doctor range with the late great John Hurt. Actually, when we put a post up on the socials to say that you were coming on the pod, and for people to ask their questions, one of the comments that somebody left, because it was a lovely photo of you, lovely portrait with this lovely beard, and somebody just put, he looks like the War Briggs with that beard.
The War Brigster, yes.
The War Brigster. Yeah, because you've got, obviously, John Hurt's got that lovely goatee.
Yeah.
Derek Jacobi's got a sort of goatee going on with his War Master.
It's what old men do. Yeah. We grow beards. I can tell you about my beard if you like. I know you didn't want to know, but I can tell you.
I'd love to know. I've introduced beards to the conversation. So
there are several things about my beards. I remember Ben Cook, of Doctor Who magazine fame. He said to me years ago, he said, "I know what you've done. You've established a look for yourself that no matter how old you get, it won't change, because people will remember that it's bald head and beard, and that's your image. You've created a sort of iconic image for yourself." Of course, he is completely wrong, because what's happened is that it's just gone white. So it's very obvious. I'm sure that picture you published, if you look back at it, there's a lot more black or grey in it, and now it's particularly the bottom bit, the beardy bit, as opposed to the moustachy bit, is really it's just fluffy white, and a little bit too long at the moment. The longer it gets, the older I look.
Right.
But I mean, I know to people of your age, you just look at me and think, old man. No, but the other thing is that I don't know why you're shaking your head, because it's obviously not true. But you'll know about shaving, right? Shaving. This is the whole area where you cut yourself, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is where you go wrong if you're wet shaving. I love the fact that you're nodding.
I'm like, I know it well. Yeah.
You very rarely cut yourself around here on the neck. This is quite easy. It's certainly on my face anyway. Mm-hmm. This is easy to do. And when I grow, and this is a note for obviously Stephen Moffat, who's grown a beard all over his face. when you grow a big beard, you just, as you get older, you just look like the old man of the sea. You just look like an old sailor or a pirate. It just makes you look ancient, especially if you're bald as well. So I thought, I don't want to have that kind of beard, but you don't want to. Shaving is such a pain in the neck, So, but I'm okay. This bit's easy. So I thought, well, this will be the beard. And I wanted to keep a bit of shaving in my life. And this is the touching bit, folks. So just cue the violins. Because I remember when my late father, when I was a teenager and he was teaching me to shave and sort of going, no, make it wetter. That's it. Now rub the foam in a bit more. Now, come on, that's it. Don't be frightened of it and all that. And I have a little moment with him. Again, not a spiritual person, but here I am talking about having a moment with my dead father when I'm shaving in the morning. And that's really special to me. And I have that every single morning that I shave. I maybe don't shave at the weekends sometimes. I'm that crazy. But I knew I was coming on a podcast today, so I had to shave. But so I have that moment really with him. And that's really special to me. And I also remember that he had a terrible last couple of years, my dad, everything went wrong health-wise. And at one point early on in that 2 years, he had a minor stroke and he was in hospital and he was a very proud man. He was always shaved, He was never had an unshaven chin, And I remember that I said, it's annoying you. He was sitting in the bed and his coordination was poor because of the stroke. I said, you haven't been able to shave? And he went, yeah. I said, do you want me to do it for you? And he went, would you? And I said, yeah. I said, come on, let's go to the bathroom. So we went into the bathroom and we started. And I can't tell you, some of this is a bit X-rated, but I was shaving it and something happened with someone else in the bathroom that was a little bit lavatorial. And I'm trying to shave my dad, which I've never shaved another person before in my life, and I don't think I have since. And it's a bit weird, and I'm doing that and he's just going like this, and then we both start laughing at what's going on in the loo in a flatulent way. And we, giving it away. And so I'm making a bad job of shaving him and we're laughing at the same time. So again, I have that little moment when I shave. So that's why I've just got a goatee beard, because I don't cut I've the zone where you cut yourself, I don't have to shave that bit, but I do get the shaving memories.
That's lovely. I mean, who expected that from let me tell you about my beard?
No, good point. You just never know what will come out.
Exactly.
From an interview with me.
It's gold.
Potentially, yes. I don't think I've got myself cancelled yet. Have I? No, right.
No, don't believe so, no. We've still got time.
Yeah. Fire away.
So, yes, the Wall Doctor.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I can't remember whose idea to do the War Doctor it was. It certainly wasn't mine. I think it may well have been Jason, but it could have been David Richardson. But Jason quite often says, listen, guys, he usually does it apologetically. He says, sorry to say, but, and you think, why are you saying sorry? Because he's trying to be nice about it, and we thought, it's worth a try, isn't it? It's worth a try. Mm-hmm. And it worked out well because John had been ill. Yeah. And couldn't get insured to do movie work, and so was looking, as he admitted in an interview with me, he said, I was just basically looking for something I could do while sitting down. Yeah. And indeed, the very first box set we did, he wasn't actually with us, and it was unusual in those days. It's quite normal for us now to work with actors who aren't in the room, and we're doing it down the line, although we get people in studio as much as possible. But he was actually down the line because he was still continuing chemotherapy at the time. He was just getting to the end of it, and the signs were that he was in remission. And and when I did the interview and I said, the question here is why did you do this? He said, they won't like the answer. And he said, I would never have done it had it not been for the fact that I was ill. He said, but it doesn't matter. He said it doesn't matter the reason why I did it. He said it's not a particularly good or flattering reason. He said, but He said, but I've done loads of jobs for all sorts of stupid reasons, and they've turned out really well. He said, and we've had a great time, haven't we? And he was so lovely to work with. I worried that, maybe because I like a bit of a laugh, but I also like to get it right. And he encapsulated it perfectly for me when he said, the thing is, he said, it's not that we're not serious about what we're doing, because we are serious about it and we want to get it right. This is what he was saying about him and me. He said, but we're not solemn about it. He said, we're serious. So we can have a laugh, we can send it up, but we're serious. We get on with it, but it's not like, shh, nobody laugh. I'd be very cross if you laugh kind of thing. Yeah. So, yeah. It was a marvellous experience working with him. I mean, I'll never forget it. And I never forget the first time he got in touch with me, and I'm so cross with myself that I didn't save the message. Jason got in touch with me. He said, it's all signed and sealed. Listen, Nick, John would like to have a chat with you. And I was like, he said, is it all right if I give him your phone number? I was like, yes, I suppose so. So when's he going to phone me? He said, well, probably like now or something, And I went, okay. So I gave him my phone. So I said, Jason, give him my phone number. Of course, Jason had my phone number. He was phoning me at the time. Get the story straight. Is no one paying attention? No, I'm not.
You were wearing a hat.
Yeah.
I was wearing a hat. It was we're all wearing a hat. And then I had to do something. I had to go and, I don't know, do something. Pick my son up from nursery or something. I can't remember what it was. And, of course, he phoned me then, and I had my phone off. So I got back and thought, oh, God, I must get my phone on. And then it said voicemail, and so I listened to it. And there's this message that said, hello, Nick. This is John. John Hurt. And I was like, I've got John telling me his name. I'm like, yeah. So I thought...
That's amazing.
He said, so give me a ring. My number's blah, 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 whatever it was. And so I rang him back. Hello? He said, so how's this going to work? What are we going to do? And I explained to him the way we worked. He went, oh, that sounds all right. Yeah. Great. Well, I look forward to it. Well, I'll see you next week or whatever. He was just, I thought, oh, my God, he's just so nice. And I've just spoken to John Hurt.
Yeah.
And as David Richardson beautifully put it, he said when he did finally arrive in the studio, although, we chatted to him a lot when he was just down the line. But when he did arrive in the studio, David said John would have none of that star treatment. He didn't assume that anyone knew who he was. He always told people who he was. Derek Jacobi's like that. He always introduces himself to people like they've never heard of him, and it's just... You think you're mega famous, and everyone in the acting community knows who you are, and yet you go, "Hello, I'm Derek," and I mean, some famous actors you meet, and they're a bit like, "Yeah, it's me." They don't tell you that because you know who I am.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, but it's very disarming when mega famous people don't assume you know who they are. It's lovely. And John wouldn't have any special treatment, he just wanted to muck in with everyone else. And he was absolutely lovely. Yeah. And it was he got ill again. The cancer returned. And the last thing he did for us, the agent got in touch, basically said, he's John's having some treatment again, but he'd love to come and do some more because he wants to be working. And again, he can't work in film. So it was a little bit, I suppose you could unfairly characterize it as a backhanded compliment. But anyway, he came and did The Invisible Man with us. And I didn't direct it. It was Ken Bentley who directed it. And I just... the producer, David Richardson, said, John's going to be in. Do you want to come and see him? You got on with him really well. And I said, I will, yeah. Tell him I'm coming in. And, I went in to see him. And he'd had quite a difficult day because he wasn't particularly well. And so the job had been quite strenuous for him. But, I mean, if you've heard the production, he's superb in it. And I remember just sitting down next to him on the sofa at the Moat Studios that we used then. No longer exist, the Moat. And I sat down, I said, how are you doing, John? And he he put his hand on my hand and said, "Oh, Nicky, Nicky, Nicky." He just said, "No one calls me Nicky," but he did.
Yeah.
He said, "I've been dancing with the Grim Reaper." He said, "It's been really rough." And then he got up, and I mean, maybe I'm just making this up, but I thought he had a sort of like a leather jacket on, a bit like the War Doctor. It was certainly, I remember the coat creaking, and he gave me a big hug, and we hugged. And I said, "Well, I'll see you in January then for the next lot of war." And he went, "Yeah, see you there. Yeah, looking forward to it." And the next thing we heard is that he died. I think it was just a matter of a few weeks later. So it's very. Yeah, we were very it sounds so silly because we only worked with him for a few weeks. We were all a bit traumatized by the loss. I know David Richardson was as well. Yeah. And Tom Baker had known John Hurt very well in the old days. And we interviewed Tom about him as well because he wanted to say something about him. And Tom just seemed to feel, I think he said he felt sort of guilty that because he and John had both been, tearaways and a lot of time spent at the bar. And I'm not talking the legal one. And Tom said, and John's so much younger than me, and yet he's gone and I still carry on. Yeah. Tom's just got great genes, and I don't mean Levi's.
Although I'm sure he'd look great in those as well.
If you say so. I couldn't possibly comment on that. But yeah, so yeah, it was a shame. But yeah, that's one of the big privileges I remember. Not to diminish, he said politically, all the other wonderful people I've worked with, but John was such a legend. Yeah, brilliant.
Absolutely. I think you say about that you'd only worked with him sort of briefly, but I think that just speaks to the impact that he had on you all both as an actor but just as a person.
Absolutely. I can't remember the quote, so I won't make something up, but I remember he said to me, because I interviewed him for Doctor Who magazine, because he didn't want a journalist to come in, and he said, I'll do the interview if you do it, Nick, because I know you now, so I trust you. Yeah. And Doctor Who magazine were quite funny about it because they thought that I'd just make it all about sort of how brilliant we were. So they absolutely insisted that it was recorded, and they heard the recording to make sure that I only wrote down what John Hurt said. And I thought, I'm not going to make stuff up. But anyway, that was my good friend Tom Spilsbury, and he is my good friend as well. But he was doing due diligence, I feel. But at one point in the interview, I said something along the lines of, I'm not going to presume that we know each other, and that, and I remember he wouldn't have me say that. He said, I can't remember the exact words, but it was along the lines of, no, we've worked together. I mean, we've spoken a lot. And he was very kindly saying to me, I don't think you're just some faceless person behind the glass who I'll forget tomorrow. And indeed, when there was his, this is just me proving that I know famous people, isn't it? His memorial service at the BFI, that, I was invited by name to come, but they didn't just ask for a big Finnish representative. Just send someone along, obviously, because we appreciate the work you did. But his wife asked for me, which was nice. Wow. I felt quite honoured by that. Yeah. I'm not going to cry, all right? I cried at the Daleks. I cried at the Daleks Master Plan screening. I don't know whether you heard about that.
No.
Oh yeah.
I was going to say now we need to know.
I was just talking about how much Doctor Who means to us all, and how I'm not going to do it now. Okay, I don't want to get a reputation. There was an Australian Prime Minister who got a terrible reputation. Bob Hawke, I think his name was, and he used to cry a lot when he made speeches. People go, "Oh, here he goes, here he goes." But I spoke about how Doctor Who means so much to all of us, and how all that business about, it's a way of escaping from trauma, and how when I woke up to the news of those episodes returning, I suddenly thought there are loads of people let's not put a figure on it, but loads of people who were having exactly the same feelings as me now.
Yeah.
Who were just feeling like, oh my God. Yeah. And I started to tell that story, and I just broke down. And Toby Haydock, who was interviewing me, looked at me like, "Oh my God, he's gone." And I put my hand over my face, you know. Anyway, okay, Nick. Yeah, moving on. Peter, maybe you'd like to say, you know, he just got. But everyone applauded. I said, "That's the first time I've got a round of applause for blubbing." You know.
You know, you can break that out now if you ever feel like you need to win the audience, get them back on side. Just have
I'm
a
an
tear.
actor. It's all fakery, you know. There's not a genuine emotion in me.
Well, speaking of the Wall Doctor and also Derek Jacobi that you mentioned there as the Wall Master.
Yes. Which was Scott Handcock's idea, I think, to do the Wall Master series.
Yeah.
Just credit where it's due.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of, you know, a lot of Big Finish. There's almost a little niche there of getting not just doctors but actors that maybe didn't really get their time in the sun on TV when they were originally in the show. So obviously John Hurt as the Wall Doctor had the one special, and then you guys sort of fleshed him out, and there's a whole story with that. Well, multiple stories now with Jonathan Carley's interpretation.
He does such an amazing job, doesn't he?
So good. So good.
Have you chatted to him? Do you know him? He's one of the nicest people on earth. He's just amazing. Yeah,
I've heard.
I know I say that about a lot of people, but I'm always so delighted when people are nice. You know.
Yeah.
I wish I could learn so much from them.
It's sad that it's a rarity, isn't it? It's sad
that
you know when you meet someone and go, oh, and they're so
really
lovely,
nice.
and it's like an exceptional thing.
Yes.
And then the Fugitive Doctor with Joe Martin.
Yeah.
More recently, but even things like, you know, I think it's sort of commonly sort of accepted that you guys sort of steered Colin Baker's Sixth Doctor in a maybe slightly different direction.
Well, and then it was very much Colin's suggestion. Really, he said, you know, we've done the way I did it on television. Now let's move beyond that. Let's have less of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's because there was a story. What was it called? The Wishing Beast or something? Or was that? Am I getting that right? Early? It was the Sixth Doctor story, and it was written by Paul Mars. Anyway, and it was beautifully authentic to the Sixth Doctor era. And I'd just taken over being executive producer, and everything was a bit rushed. We were sort of trying to, you know, in the mould of Terrence Dicks, we were trying not to have a blank screen, as it were, except audio-wise. You know, we were trying to make sure there was another production. And Paul is, you know, a fantastic writer. And so I thought, here we go. Yes, absolutely. There's the deal. We sent it, you know, and we were about to record it. And Colin got in touch with me the night before, and he said, look, Nick, I'm going to do this because you're a mate and I don't want to mess you around. He said, but this is precisely the kind of thing I said I didn't want to do, because this is my Doctor from the TV days, and he's harsh and brash and dismissive and a bit cruel, and I don't want to do it like that. And I went, I said, I'm so sorry, Colin. And he went, no, it's fine. I'm not, you know, but just make a note not to do this again. I said, listen, leave it with me. I'll rewrite it tonight. I'll go through and I'll soften him, and then we'll have a new version tomorrow printed out. All right. And he went, okay. Oh, God, that's really nice. Thank you. And I did do it. Now, Paul Mars was very upset because he said, you know, I remember him saying, I am a writer, you know, I could have done it myself. I said, I know, but there was no time. And of course you could have done it, but there was no time. And so we did soften it. I think it still has a few harsh edges in that story, but I did, you know, I took the sting out of a lot of it.
Yeah.
You know. So that was interesting that we nearly came a cropper there.
But I think it's interesting to sort of expand on those certain incarnations that you know we maybe haven't really seen, and give new life to those characters, and then also actors that had maybe sort of distanced themselves from the show since being on it. I mean, the big one that comes to mind is Tom Baker.
Yes.
Who was it around 2012? The first.
I think it was. I think it was 2012, and that was down to I think Liz Sladen and Louise Jameson definitely. Yeah, I remember having a phone conversation with Liz, with her saying, if he's ever going to do it, Nick, I think he's going to do it now. He said, so get on to him. He seems to be in a different place now. And Louise and he had a sort of a dinner where they had spoken about the difficulties in the past. Because I don't think it's a secret that Tom was quite harsh to her at the time. And certainly people have seen behind the scenes footage where he is a little brusque with her. And so, but then it was very weird because somehow I got put in touch with Tom, and he'd send me these very strange emails and about, I've just been to the garage and my dog, and I'm thinking, I don't know what this is about. But it was all just, no paragraphs. It was all just I think he was just typing it on his little phone. And I think at one point he got confused as to who he was talking to, because he ended up doing the stuff for BBC Audio first, which is set in a cottage or something.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever heard any of it. Because some of those ideas that materialised, as I gather, in that, he was suggesting them to me as stories we could do. And I thought, well, this doesn't sound much like Doctor Who to me. So it was all a bit confused. And then he was doing that. And then we got in touch with him again and managed to get him on board. And I think our initial plans were to have Liz in them. And then sadly she died quite early on in that process. There was definitely a script written by me for her, but the whole thing got caught up and delayed because a Doctor Who fan managed to insert themselves into the process. I'm saying it like I'm not a Doctor Who fan, obviously I am, but someone not connected with Big Finish was trying to make it conditional that Tom and Nick Courtney did something with us if this person was the writer and director. And suffice it to say, this is just my judgment, and I could be completely wrong, and people who know this person will think, well, that's where everything went wrong for Big Finish. I didn't consider the work that was being presented to me as appropriate for Doctor Who. I don't think it worked. I didn't think it was strong enough. I didn't think it was well written enough. And I just, my commitment is to try to do the best for Big Finish and the best for Doctor Who through Big Finish. And I just thought this is hiding to nothing. It would get this out there, but I just don't think it's the right thing. But and so I think that delayed the fact that I wouldn't take that for Big Finish. And I think I made that decision kind of unilaterally as well. I didn't share it with anyone else in Big Finish. I think David Richardson was aware of it, but I just thought, there's no way we're doing this. This is just wrong. And it was quite sad for me that I think Nick Courtney was a bit hurt about that, because he felt I was turning him down. And I wasn't turning him down. I just wanted him to be in something better and worthy of him. And then sadly, he died. But I can't remember the time scheme of this at all exactly, but it sort of feels it all happened within a few months, and that's probably not right. But maybe if I wrote the biopic or whatever of it, that's the order I'd put it in. But then, and so when we finally presented a script to Tom that had Romana in it, he phoned me up and said, am I going mad here? Because I think I've read this before. And of course, I'd adapted my Liz Sladen, my Sarah Jane script for Romana. It changed it completely, but some of the fundamental plot pillars were the same. And and I said, Tom, you have read it before, but it was for Liz, and now it's for Mary. But I was so excited about it. I wrote so many of them. And this leads me to quoting a very unfavorable thing from social media, but it just amuses me so much. I love it when, I don't like to be hated, but at least it's an emotion, isn't it? What really irritates me is when people have a sort of non-reaction to what I've done. So I'm giving you all a tip of how to annoy me, which is just it was all right. It was all right.
Yeah.
That kind of infuriates me. Obviously, I love it when people say, "Oh God, everyone loves it when someone loves your work." But I do get a kind of perverse pleasure when someone absolutely hates what you do and thinks it's like the work of the devil or something. And I remember someone writing somewhere, I don't know, on a toilet wall maybe, that they said there've been X number of Tom Baker Big Finish stories so far. Don't know how many there were at the time. And Nick Briggs has written another X number of them, which was like a very large proportion of them. Please make it stop. And it's just thought, yes, I've got an anti-fan.
Yeah.
You know. It's like when someone wrote in about Creatures of Beauty, which is all in the wrong order, deliberately, and said, "There's something wrong with this CD, put it right and send it back to me." And I loved that. I loved being misunderstood so much because
that's brilliant.
I love the fact that they probably persisted and thought, this is just, oh, it's doing it again. Is it jumping? What's the matter with it? They probably got it out a few times and polished it, didn't they, to see if there was a scratch
My
on
CD
it.
player on shuffle.
Yeah.
Yes. But they probably went and bought a new CD player or something from Richer Sounds, which no longer exists, I don't think. Anyway, that's where I used to get my CD players. Anyway.
Well, as we're talking about the Tom Baker and his role within Big Finish, I want to kind of jump to other box sets. So we've got the Third Doctor Adventures box sets, the second Doctor Adventures box set, and then we've also got what I've listened to quite recently, which was the Beware the City of Illusions, which was the first Doctor adventure.
Where he's a helicopter pilot.
Where he's a helicopter pilot, of course. What I really like about listening to the classic adventures in kind of like modern times now is it feels really expanded for the classic adventures, putting them in kind of more modern topical situations from now.
Yes.
But they're still from the 60s, 70s. It really kind of expands that kind of timey-wimey feel of Doctor Who. So I wanted to ask you what it was like, or what is it like writing for a classic Doctor now?
Well, I mean, now for a classic Doctor is just an alien planet, isn't it? So for the first Doctor arriving in 2020, whatever, in Beware the City of Illusions, he's encountering our normal, a world that's sort of normal to us, horribly normal, because there's sort of cynical politicians and what have you going on, and shady deals being done. But to him, it's just like him arriving on the planet of the Sensorites. It's all weird and bonkers, and people are behaving very strangely. So that was the fun of that. I mean, the driving force behind that was that I thought, if I'm going to do a story with Polly, and I wanted to do stories with the surviving actors from the 60s, where they didn't have to pretend to be 22 when they're now, 70 or 80 or whatever, and to take that curse off them. I remember, Katie and I spoke about it with Jo. She said, actually, she's really good at, giving a feel of the young Jo, and she still does it from time to time. But she said, come on, seriously, Nick, can we do something about this? And I said, yeah. I'll have it that the Doctor comes back and finds you again when you're much older.
Yeah.
Which was quite a difficult one to get past the Doctor Who production office because of the Sarah Jane adventure where the Doctor says something, and I just said, yeah, well, he lied, didn't he? Went, oh right, yeah, okay, that works. That's right. Because he didn't want to tell her that something bad. I can't remember the exact way it works, but it's a fun thing to do, and I wanted to give those lovely actors who I love so much an easier time of it in the studio, and not have that horrible feeling like, oh, no one's really going to believe I'm 22, I sound much older now. I think fans don't seem to mind though. You know,
No.
some of the Lost Adventures we've done. You know, I've aged up Jamie and Zoe or made them the same age as the actors are. But you know, then they did those Lost Adventures, and people just no one batted an eyelid. You know, so
yeah. I think it's also really lovely with the companions, especially for like older actresses, to be given this work and these stories, because that's, you know, not particularly common.
That's true, isn't it? Because, you know, that's the sad thing about the acting profession. When, you know, both men and women, when you get to a certain age, people sort of you just get to play. You know, if you're lucky, you get to play the judge or the senior barrister or something. But mostly, you get to play people on their deathbed or dribbling or homeless people, or you know, you just get all the, you know. You get all the low rent roles where people go, ugh, it's just some disgusting old person, isn't it? You know, that's mainly why. I mean, I'd take a few of those jobs if someone would give them to me without me having to audition for them, as we've established. Yeah. No, I won't do an audition, but I will play someone sleeping rough. Terrible thing to say. I apologise deeply now. But no, you're right. It's good to get, you know, and you know, Wendy, for example, just played a very interesting element of Zoe in our next Second Doctor box set, and really knocked it out of the park. She was incredible. I'm very excited for people to hear that in the next one, which we haven't announced, so I can't mention the title of it. No. It all goes off in a very strange direction. As you might remember, at the end of the Potential Daleks, there's a sort of alert from Gallifrey, and they think, uh-oh, we're in trouble now. And yes, there's trouble.
There's trouble.
There is trouble.
There's trouble.
Is that can we have that as a hot scoop? There is trouble.
Yeah. Well, it's, you know, it's very surprising, isn't it, that in Doctor Who there's trouble.
There's trouble, yeah.
I know.
There's a joke that John Ainsworth and I always have, that I remember Sylvester McCoy, when I started being executive producer, he said to me, I've got an idea for a Doctor Who story that I want to do. And I said, okay, what is it? He said, I want to do one with a silent movie. I said, yeah, you just don't want to have to read out any lines. That's what that is. I said, how's that going to work? He said, that's for you to work out. I said, but what actually happens? He said, well, the Doctor somehow gets involved in the whole silent movie studio thing. Okay, yeah. And I said, but what happens at the end? And he said, well, here's the thing. He said, the Doctor saves the day. But he said it like I was going to go, oh my God, that's blown my mind. That never happens.
Bless him. Well, you've been in every series of the revival TV series.
Yes.
And you've written for almost every Doctor, I believe.
I've no idea, probably.
We tried to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you've written for all Doctors 1 to 11.
Yeah.
Have I?
Yeah.
In some form.
I think.
Right.
1 to 9 you've done on Big Finish.
Yeah.
And then the 10th Doctor.
Yeah, I did the No One Died the storybook. What did I do for 11 then?
The Dalek Generation.
Oh yes. How could I forget that?
Yeah.
I wrote it and read it out loud.
Yes. Are there any that you haven't written for that you'd be like really wanting to take a shot at?
Not particularly, no. I mean, I certainly wouldn't turn down the opportunity if it came up, but I'd rather stick to the eras that are sort of embedded in my heart from the time I was a kid, when you love things all the more, you know. When you get into your 20s, you start being hypercritical of things, and even though you sort of still love your Doctor Who, I love the Doctor Who that I loved unconditionally as a kid, you know, so that's where I'm happiest at the moment. Although I'm having great fun with the 11th Doctor. I've taken over as script editor for the next box set we're doing at the moment. Not the next one you'll hear, which will be announced, I think, next week. So probably last week or 7 weeks ago from when this podcast was. Who knows? It's a bit timey-wimey. But I'm loving that. I have a particular passion for Matt Smith's Doctor. And, you know, I was delighted by the coverage you gave that, and also the brilliant review in Doctor Who magazine, because that was I was involved at every stage of that. There was some fantastic work done by the script editor, whose name I can't remember because it's not a real name. The person who did it has done it under a pseudonym, so I can't reveal who they are. It's very disappointing to me that they've hid their light under a bushel, because I'd like them to get full praise for the amazing work they did. Also, the 11th Doctor was started out, the 11th Doctor Adventures as opposed to Chronicles. This is with Miles Taylor and not Jacob Dudman. It started out being worked on by a brilliant and delightful person called Max Kashevsky, but for various reasons, personal reasons, he couldn't continue, and so it had to be picked up by someone else. But I got involved very early on and did a lot of work on the scripts, and also throughout the post-production I really I did a lot of work, even though I wasn't the sound designer. David Rucroft did brilliant sound design, but I worked a lot on it. I'm getting more and more interfering in my old age. I say to the sound designer, send me the stems so I get the dialogue and the spot effects and the background effects and the crowds. I get it all separate. And so I adjust the mix and I add little things here and there and take some things away. And, so I've got my hands all over it. I'm sort of molding it. And also I sometimes create sound effects for them, and go, no, you need something more like this. And they go, ooh, can I use that? I go, yeah, use that. That's why I spent half an hour making it,
Yeah.
And likewise with the music, Sam Dinley, absolutely brilliant doing the music. But he hid his light under a bushel a bit by not giving it enough prominence now and again. I said to Sam, the good news is the music's brilliant, but I'm not hearing it enough sometimes, and sometimes it can really take centre stage. So, like those bits in the final cut, the first episode where the helicopter's going overhead. I mean, that was my helicopter. I put that in to make it more. The helicopter in the original one was just a little. This was, I wanted you to be close to the rotor blades, and also the music really surges through that, and that was me with my hands all over it, and maybe occasionally taking cues and using them in different places. And I have to say that both David Rucroft and Sam Dinley I didn't detect any teeth grinding from them. So if they did do it, they did it very subtly or when they weren't near a microphone, and liked what I did. But so that's why I feel so proud of the way it's going down and is very popular, because I feel even though I didn't write it, and I didn't do the music, and I didn't do the sound design, I was kind of all over it and directing it as well. And such a marvellous experience working with Miles and Jasmine. I mean, they're just delightful people, aren't they? I mean, you haven't met Jasmine, have you? But you've met
Haven't met
Miles.
Jasmine, no. No Miles.
You knew him from before, did you?
Yeah, we did a Comic-Con panel together. Miles and I did.
He's one of those people that it's like, again, it's that thing of like, oh, you're really lovely, nice, and you're really talented.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? I just want to, I would just want to work with people like that all my life. I'd be happy if these 11th Doctor adventures go on forever with Miles, because he's so rewarding and interesting to work with. He's very keen on. How can I phrase this without sounding like a horrible person? Some actors, obviously they're all brilliant. I'm saying that now. Some actors don't want to be interfered with, and don't want to. They don't want to be given notes, and they'd rather just do it and do it as few times as possible, because they want to just be fresh and that's it, I've done it. Do we have to do another take? I don't want to do another take. I think you got it there, kind of thing. And Miles isn't like that at all. Miles is the one wanting to do another take, and I love that in an actor. I love it when they're not tired of it or bored of it or think, what time is it? Can we get home now? There's none of that with him. He's just like, well, can we do another one? And sometimes I say, well, let's just do a pick up of that bit. And then he looks at me, I go, all right, we'll do the whole thing again. I don't mind, you know. And he said, and he goes, good, that'd be brilliant. And Jasmine's the same. She's like always jumping up and down and singing. You can't stop her singing and dancing between takes, you know. And sometimes during them as well. I think we heard you moving around a bit there, Jasmine. She goes, sorry, having too much fun, you know. They're such a delight.
But you can hear them having fun throughout the whole process. You can hear it. And then it makes you enjoy it more and want to be a part of it and listen to it.
Yes, it is genuine joy. Yeah. It's lovely. I have that with lots of people, but these people are new to me, you know, and it makes it all the more delightful. You know, I mean, like Tim Trelaw, I have a fantastic working relationship with him, but I think it's mostly based on abuse, you know. We're just so rude to each other all the time. You know, I once told him that John Pertwee told me to shut up when I was on stage with him. Shall I quickly tell you that story?
Yeah,
please.
Absolutely.
I interviewed John Pertwee. John Pertwee was a tough person to interview, and I'd interviewed him a lot, and he was very concerned that people had heard it all, and so I didn't want to interview him again. This was at a convention, and Andrew Beach, who was arranging it, said, and Nick, he said, you're interviewing John Pertwee at some planning meeting or that. And I went, I'm not doing that. I said, I'm not doing that because I've had enough of doing that. You know, he's difficult. and Andrew said, well, I've told him you are, so you have to do it. And I was moaning to all my friends, like, you know, an ingrate. I was moaning, like, oh, I don't want to interview John Pertwee. So it makes me feel really small and I hate it, you know. And so I was in the green room, which was absolutely packed at this convention with all the hangers on. And I suppose that's what I was as well. And John Pertwee arrives in his costume, stands at the door, and everyone, and he's there. He just looked magnificent. And got to give him this. He always recognised me and always knew my name. He was like that though, John Pertwee. Yeah. If he'd sort of interacted with someone, he'd call over to people, oh, you know, Kevin, whatever, you know. And he saw me and he went, Nick, and the room parted like the Red Sea. And I'd just been going, oh, it's John Pertwee. I don't want to interview him, miserable so and so. And then suddenly I'm just confronted with him along this long room, and he's the other end of the room. And he said, I hear you're doing my interview. And I just say, I'm not doing. And I went, yes, that's right. No courage whatsoever. So I went and had a chat with him, and I said, listen, John, I said, I know you're. He said, yeah, people have heard everything I have to say. And I said, well, why don't I go round and ask people what they want to ask you? And I'll get a list of new questions. He said, that's a good idea. Do that. So I took a little notebook and I did exactly that. When we got to do the panel, there was this weird control panel in front of us, which was sort of angled away from the audience and towards us. So you could put something on it that the audience wouldn't see. Okay. So as I came on, I introduced John Pertwee, and he had a prepared speech about his the name and ancestry of his family, about the French, you know, origins of it, and he had all these brilliant French pronunciations. My name is and he's off doing this. And he's put a piece of paper down there, and he's looking at the audience, and he's looking down at the piece of paper just to, you know, and then he loses his place. So he immediately turns to me and says, so what are you going to do then? You know, and the audience snigger because he's John Pertwee and he's been a bit gruff, and I'm just there looking like a lemon. And I said, well, John, as we spoke about earlier, and I started to tell the story about getting questions, but he, while I was doing that, found his place on the piece of paper, right, and wanted to carry on. So he just, and I'm in the middle of going, you know, and he went, shut up! And the audience there was thousands of them, and they all laughed. And in my distorted memory of it, they're all laughing really horribly and cruelly at me. And I'm just humiliated. You know, Doctor Who has just shouted, shut up to me in my face in front of 1,000 people. Now, of course, he was just making the show go on, and there was no malice intended at all. You know? And I was a gibbering idiot. I was going, well, John, I don't think it was earlier on we spoke. And he's just said, I don't know what that noise is. Let's put a good show on. You shut up. I'll carry on speaking because I'm the famous one here, you know. Anyway, I've told the world that story. I stupidly told Tim Trelaw that, and every now and again when I'm giving him a note, he just goes, "Shut up!" Which serves me right.
It's been over 25 years now at Big Finish.
Yeah, and 20 years as executive producer.
20 years as exec.
This July it will be, yeah.
How do you feel you've evolved as all those things I listed at the beginning as a creative?
Yeah.
In all of those forms.
Well, I suppose each time the creative cycle goes round, you just keep going through the same experience, but you pick up more of the good stuff, hopefully, as you go along. You learn more, and maybe sometimes the process becomes a bit easier in places, but then because you've learnt more, you go to more difficult places, and so you grow a bit as you go through it. I look forward to it. I don't think of it as a treadmill. When I worked in magazines for a while, I was a magazine editor, and before that, editorial assistant editor and stuff. And every time you did an issue of the magazine, I did feel like, oh, here we go around the treadmill again. Here we go. We get the photographs, we get the interviews, we get the room, blah, blah, blah. And it was a bit tiresome. But for me, with the audio process, the production process, the idea, the storyline, the scripts, the studio, the sound design, the music, the cover, the whole look of it, the promotion of it, I don't feel that about that. It's kind of, whoopee, here we go again. Whee! So it's just really growing and learning more, and also being able to help other people, or annoying them by rewriting their scripts. I don't know. But luckily, I've had a lovely writer recently with all my rewrites. He just keeps saying, "Brilliant! Oh, thank you. That's great. Yeah. I really like that." Yeah, but you were meant to be writing it, not me. Anyway. So yeah, that's how I feel I've mutated horribly.
Amazing. Well, we've got a few questions from the listeners, which we'll whiz through because I know you've got a.
These are yes or no answers.
Yeah, real concise, close questions. We've got one from the Nick of it, friend of the pod, Nick.
Yeah.
Another Nick.
Well, it's a good name.
Of all the Dalek stories that you provided the voices for, which is your absolute favourite?
Yes.
Next question.
Well, I defer to David Tennant, Clang, who said that when people ask you for your favourite, it feels like you're being a traitor to the others. I love so much of what I suppose for sheer impact emotionally for myself, and something that changed my life, which I said to Russell T Davies at a party I was at recently. Clang, 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 clang. It was Stephen Moffat's Christmas party. Clang, 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 clang. Frank Skinner was there. Clang. Philip Glenister was there. Clang. Peter Davison was there. I said to Russell, I was a bit tired and emotional, and I gave him a big hug. I said, "You changed my life. You changed my life." And he said, "Oh, you changed your own life." But doing Dalek, that first one.
Yeah.
It's never, I mean, I always enjoy it. I always have a great time, but it's never been quite as impactful as that. And, lovely work from Rob Shearman in that too, And I had a great time. And I think that Barnaby Edwards and I, who's the Dalek operator and also a great director and writer for Big Finish, he and I knew each other before that, but it was the two of us together, and we really hit it off, and he's a delightful human being, and we had a fantastic time together on that shoot, and I think that it changed our friendship forever. I think we have something between us as friends that was defined during that, and we even we have stupid little sayings that we evolved during that recording that we just occasionally text to each other, just a bit like the Rob Shearman Mr. Big Shot thing, which listeners and viewers won't know what the heck we're talking about. But Barney and I occasionally, I mean, one of them is right self-destruct. Now, you don't, but we often send each other that. Well, we do from time to time send each other that message, and it has a great resonance for us.
Speaking of Daleks,
yes,
we have a question.
Often do.
Yes. I'm sure you haven't spoken about Daleks in ages.
No.
We have.
Here's one.
Hey.
we've got a question from an awful Jack Alexander, who said, "Amazing guest for an amazing podcast. I like many have grown up with Nick's performance as the Daleks. What would be Nick's favourite line he's ever uttered as a Dalek, Cyberman or monster? His personal favourite has to be something silly, like 'I am not Nick' from either the Daleks, for the meta of it all."
Oh, yes. Well, "I am not Nick." I did ask Chris, who I like to mention this because every time I mention it in a BBC interview, they cut it out for some reason. Okay. But Chris just lives over there from where I live. He's just down the road. I can see his house from my house. That feels like he's going to issue a restraining order. Yeah. But we live in the same road. Anyway, I did ask him after I'd done that story. I said, did you do that on purpose as a sort of joke, having the Dalek saying "I'm not Nick"? And he went, "Yes, of course I did." I thought, okay, yeah, I just don't, because no one said anything about it on set, and I kept having to say the line over and over again. And I don't know, I can't remember whether anyone laughed at the time. I don't know. So that's up there, actually. I am not Nick. But I think, I have to go back to Dalek again, and "you would make a good Dalek." When the Doctor loses his rag and the Dalek just says "you would make a good Dalek," because that's like the worst thing a Dalek could ever say to the Doctor. And that in that moment, I think the Doctor's thinking, oh my God, I have become my worst enemy.
So good. So good.
It is.
One here from Studios Murphy, who says, "What was the most challenging scene you've had to film or record?"
Well, I think I suppose the most challenging scenes are in the TV series, because when I'm doing Big Finish, I'm on home turf.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So obviously I feel some pressure to deliver a good performance, but if I mess it up, I'm the boss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's your gaff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can make a silly joke and talk rubbish, and some people will laugh, other people resign, obviously. So when I'm on the TV series, I'm just a guy who's turned up to do a tiny bit of the main job. I have no authority or control, and so there's much more pressure for me to get it right, because if you don't get it right, you're wasting everyone's time. On Asylum of the Daleks, I think it was right at the end where the building up to the Daleks all saying "Doctor Who," and the Doctor comes out the TARDIS, and there are lots of different Daleks speak. I think I may not be remembering it properly, but I remember that this was at the stage when they gave me a switchboard where I could switch which Dalek's lights flashed. So I'd say, well, which one's speaking then? I say, so I'll do that one for that one, and that one's on at the time. So as well as speaking my lines and worrying about which character I am, I'm also performing a manual function of switching lights, on for the transmitter to go to. And I remember it was very tense, and we had no time, and we really had to get it right. And as always with the Dalek lines, they quite often leave them to the end of the day. They deal with all the real people earlier on and give them time, and then they go, "Bish, bash, bosh, Daleks, 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 Daleks." Yeah. And I remember Andrew Beach, the famous Doctor Who fan, and who used to run lots of conventions, a huge collection of props and things. A lot of his Daleks were in Asylum of the Daleks. And so he'd been allowed a special visit. Andrew and I have known each other for many, many years, and I wanted to make him feel involved, and he turned out to be really blooming useful, because I said, "Listen, these Daleks keep changing." I said, "Can you do the switching for me?" And he was like, he was there, and he did a fantastic job. But getting that right, and I told Andrew which one was speaking when and everything, and doing that scene that we didn't have time to do many takes of it, probably just 2 or maybe even 1, I don't remember. It was very tense. I think that was really challenging, because I thought, if I muck this up and haven't told Andrew the right switches to switch, everyone's going to be really quite cross with me. I don't know. It's and the ones, the Thingamy's Apprentice, I never understood those titles. That one, there was a scene in that I actually got told off. The only time I've ever been told off by a director, by Hettie MacDonald, who's a fantastic director, and I really respect her and think she's brilliant at what she does. And there was a scene in which there was a shot which involved a Dalek saying something and then turning around and a door opened. So there were no people in it. There was just Daleks are people too. But, you know, but when I spoke, the lights didn't flash on the Dalek, and the Dalek radio control guy, Colin Newman, hadn't switched on the transmitter, so it wasn't. And I stopped the take, and I went, "Oh, the lights are not," in the Dalek voice. The lights aren't working. And so people switched it back on, and then we did another take. And then I was just sort of walking around smiling on set, talking to Daleks, and Hettie just came up to me. She said, "Never call cut on my set again. Do you understand me?" And I just, the blood drained from my face. And I just thought, wow, she is so brilliant. And so she was such an attentive director to me. She used to come round the back and talk to me about the characters. What are you thinking when the Supreme says that? Very few directors ask you questions like that when you're the voice of the Daleks. But I would say, well, I'm thinking, she said, I don't think it is that. I think it's X, Y, and Z. And you go, oh, yeah. And then you do it. And then she come around and say, it was better, wasn't it, that way? And you go, yeah. So she was absolutely brilliant. So when she said that to me, 1,000,001 things shot through my head to say, you know, smart Alec responses. I just said, I'm very sorry. And then she just walked off. And then later on, she saw me taking an interest in the storyboards. And she said, "Do you want to come over and have a look?" And I think that was her sort of saying, I was just cross with you for that little amount of time. And I'm fine now. And she wanted to talk me through the storyboards. And do you want to have a look at the framing? And I go, yeah, that was brilliant. So she was a delightful human being. Came to all my ADR sessions, which is very unlike directors at Doctor Who. They leave the Daleks to just get on with it. But she turned up and I said, "What are you doing here?" She said, "Why wouldn't I be here?" You know, Rachel Talalay was like that. She'd come to all the ADR stuff as well. Yeah.
We also have another one here from Harry saying, "Are there any audio adventures you'd particularly love to see put to screen?"
Oh goodness, too many. Wouldn't it be great to see the War Doctor stuff? Oh, yeah. I'd like to see my adaptation of War of the Worlds on the big screen as well. I did that, not Doctor Who, obviously, and we had to call it The Martian Invasion of Earth, because otherwise Jeff Wayne would have sued us. Yeah. He's trademarked the name The War of the Worlds, which is an interesting move. Anything in particular? Yeah, I can't narrow it down.
No. Too hard of a question.
It is too hard.
Yeah.
We've got one here from Meowsers Yummers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know them well.
Yeah. Hi, Nick. I was just wondering if there were any aliens or villains? Any aliens or villains?
The new villains.
If there were any aliens or villains on Doctor Who that you didn't get to voice that you would have been interested in voicing yourself, I'd love to have heard your take on Mr. Ring-a-Ding.
Oh, well, I can't think of any, no.
I mean, you've got quite a few bases covered there.
Yeah, I'm very happy with the ones I've done. Yeah. I mean, there was a moment when they were talking about the Cybermen, they thought they might put me in a cyber suit.
Oh, that'd be fun.
And then I remember telling my mum, who was still alive then, obviously I wouldn't tell her if she was dead, telling my mum about that. And she went, "Oh, Nick, that's a job for a young man," didn't she? Yeah, yeah. So I thought, and when I saw those guys on set, just like leaning their heads against each other in order to be able to be heard by each other, and all the steam coming out of them because we were filming at night, and and it's not comfortable. And then at one point where they clamped some guy into his cyber helmet and it caught his ear, and he squealed he yelped like a dog, in absolute agony. And I just thought, they've got a really bad job, haven't they? I'm over here just in the warm saying words into a microphone. I'm fine with this. But no, I can't think of anyone else. I would have liked to have done more Ice Warrior voices, actually. But they decided to, get the actors to the Ice Warrior voices who were in the costumes, which seemed fair enough, I suppose.
Yeah.
He said through gritted teeth.
We'll finish with our final listener question.
Okay.
We've got one from Box of Cats, Catherine Wheeler, who said, "Hi, Nick. How do you source new writers and producers? Is it mostly a case of reaching out to those original work you've enjoyed, or do you look inside the fan community?
I don't have a good answer for that. It seems to be a haphazard process. Sometimes, well, I mean, look, listen, we can't read unsolicited suggestions because you open yourself to the legal problem where someone might send you something that you don't read, but you come up with something later that's almost exactly the same with it, or bears great similarities. And there was one case many years ago where someone said, you've just done this and that is my idea because I sent it to you 2 years ago. And I remember thinking, oh, I know, it's unopened in that bottom drawer down there. And it was, with still the staples along the jiffy bag and everything. And I just thought, but how can I prove that to you? And I thought, this is the trouble, isn't it? I sometimes do talk to people about ideas, and here's an example of a random meeting. I was at the BFI screening of Terror of the Zygons, and Stephen Noonan, who plays the First Doctor, loves to go to those screenings, and he actually bought me a ticket, and he introduced me to some of his fans he'd met, and one of them was a young chap who was really interested in writing and just wanted to talk about it. He said, I want to write more, and could I have a chat? And so I think he gave me his email address, and I got Heather, my assistant, to just arrange a chat. I sometimes do that, and it was also a bit of a favour to Stephen as well. He said he's a good lad, this chap, and I had a chat with him, and he came up with some really interesting ideas. And he said, well, I could write some sample things for you, and he wrote such good sample things and such good dialogue that I actually, it's very unusual actually, I actually commissioned him to write some storylines straight away. So that was and I've just had the first draft of his script through, and I'm absolutely loving it. I think it's remarkable work, but that happens once in a blue moon. And it's very difficult to take a risk on someone new, because most of the time, by I don't know, the odds are that someone you bump into in the street, as it were, is not going to be right for it. And then you end up just spoiling someone's dream. So it's really difficult. I'm a bit too much of a coward about it. I like to, as the Doctor Who TV series has done, you find people who could do it, and then you work them to death. And you keep commissioning them time after time. I mean, I could quite happily work with Alan Barnes writing for the rest of my natural days, because he never, and Rob Valentine, for example. Those are two people I just picked out there. There are loads of other brilliant people, and luckily they're not watching, so they're not thinking he didn't mention me. So it's I don't know what and every now and again I think we must get some new people. We can't always just have the same people. And I think, but the same people are really good, aren't they? So occasionally I make an effort to reach out and to look around, because people do write in, despite the fact we say don't write in. People do write in, and occasionally we do. And also people come from the short trips opportunity as well. My favourite one of a person who came up to me at a convention and said to me, I really want to write a Big Finish story. And I was thinking, okay, how am I going to deal with this? And he said, there's only one problem. And I said, what's that? He said, I don't have any ideas. And I said, I was kind of like, oh, phew. I said, oh, well, there's not much I can do about that. He went, I know. It's terrible, isn't it? Anyway, thanks very much. I love everything you do. Brilliant. And he was really nice person. But just saying, you know what I mean? I'd really like to do that job. So could I be the next Doctor Who? The only trouble is I can't act. But
go
that's
on.
Probably what they thought about me. Why not? Let's give it a spin. That's what I wanted them to say to me about Quatermass when I said I'll play Quatermass, and they just looked at me and showed me the door. What a way to end.
What a way to end. Well, thank you so much, Nick. It's been amazing chatting to you,
Yeah.
and really lovely
Well,
to meet
I've
you.
really enjoyed it, and sorry if I've gone on a bit.
No.
No.
Sorry if we've kept you.
Yeah. From
I know
Sabine.
Heather's going to be
I should
furious.
Yeah.
please apologise to Heather for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
I think we need to drop
She's-
her an
yeah.
email and apologise after this.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah.
That. She'll like that.
Yeah.
Get her on the podcast to be interviewed, and she can show you how angry she can get.
Yeah.
She's the fiercest person I've ever. She's not at all fierce. She's really nice.
Bless her. But,
She's another of my favourite human beings.
Good.
but thank you so much. I mean, is there anything you'd like to point people to in particular of recent releases?
Well, just the 11th Doctor Adventures.
Yeah.
The first question, particularly proud of that. And also the second Doctor Adventures I've been working on, like the
Yes.
potential Daleks and, Beyond War Games, ho-ho.
Yeah.
That's been a particular joy for me. And the third Doctor Adventures. But also all the other ranges that I don't have directing involvement with. There's so many brilliant things happening. There's so much to choose from. And... who knows, one day there might even be a super duper new website that will promote these things even better. You know,
Who knows?
it's not as far away as you might think it is.
Okay.
And
Insider.
I dangerously predict that it won't go as badly wrong as it did last time.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Fingers
Yes,
crossed.
everything crossed.
But thank you so much, and
Thank you.
hopefully we'll chat again at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. And, I did do this for the love of stories.
Oh.
He's
He's
good,
good,
isn't he?
he's good.
He's good.
Shameless. Shameless is the word you're looking for. Yeah. Well, thank you. Honestly, I really
Good.
enjoyed it.
See
Cheerio.
you soon. Have a good
Bye,
afternoon.
Nick. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Well, thank you for listening, and thank you very much to our guest this week, Nicholas Briggs, for joining us. If you've enjoyed, please make sure to give this a like, share, subscribe, follow on your podcast platforms, maybe even leave us a review. All of that would really help us out, so it's very much appreciated. If this is your first time here at the Say So podcast, we have new episodes every Wednesday where we do reviews, discussions, interviews like this one, and cover all of the latest Doctor Who news. If you'd like to see more from us, you can support us over on Patreon, where we have lots of exclusive content, including bonus podcasts, audio commentaries, reviews, and more. If you'd like to get in touch, then you can drop us an email at thesaytopod@gmail.com, or you can give us a follow at thesaytopod on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Next week, we're joined by another special guest. It's the lovely Josh Carr from the Who Knew podcast, and we're going to be talking our pitches for a Doctor Who movie. Can't wait for that. It's going to be great. In the meantime, thank you again for joining us. Have a gorgeous week, and we'll see you soon. All right, cheers.